Chapter 21. Storm the Storm was one of Sweet Sister Island's few large, ocean-going, two-masted ships. Count Godric usually sent her to White Harbor to sell crabs, fish, and goat cheese in exchange for wood, wool, and hides, or to Gulltown in the Vale to trade salvage for grain and vegetables. The Storm sailed that route year-round, but today she was crossing the narrow sea to Braavos. In a small cabin with a single window, Victa sat pale and hollow-eyed. "Thank you, my lord," he said in a voice that trembled. "If you hadn't, those bandits wouldn't have even let us leave." Victa no longer had the composure he'd shown when speaking with Arthur in the cabin the last time they'd been underway. His face was drawn, his shoulders slumped. "I know well enough that even if we left hostages behind, they wouldn't let us go." Bandits had detained part of the crew and 3 of Count Godric's sons as hostages. Arthur, ink-stained quill in hand as he scribbled plans for Braavos, looked up. "You look like you need a drink," he offered, "or maybe a good night's sleep in your berth. Please, don't let them set me out again, my lord." Victa knelt as if in prayer, hands clasped, voice breaking. "They're bandits, utterly untrustworthy. They beat my sailors for sport, like some sort of wrestling entertainment. They said there can only be one captain on a ship. They'll kill me and throw me into the sea." The wrecking of the wavebreaker had taken something from the man, courage, spirit, whatever had kept him steady. "Lord, believe me, if things don't change, we'll never reach Braavos alive." Victa swallowed, forcing himself to calm. They won't obey a lord's command. At least he hadn't lost his wits entirely. Arthur shrugged out of his coarse tunic. "Can you write?" he asked. "Ah, yes?" Victa's newfound steadiness wavered again, confusion and fear in his expression. "What are you going to do?" "Write everything down about Braavos," Arthur said, bare-chested, stretching the stiffness from his shoulders as he pushed open the cabin door. "Especially that insurance contract you signed with the merchant. Then get ready to do what I tell you. We're getting to Braavos, by any means necessary. Money, honor, power, oaths, faith. What could make a band of salvagers and smugglers obey on the wide sea? Violence. Though Arthur disliked using force, it was the most direct, effective option at hand. Count Godric's command had given him a stage he intended to perform. On deck, the Storm's first mate leaned in to whisper to Zon Bonell, the Count's nephew at the helm. "The Northerners finally come out. I thought he'd hide in his room forever." Zon Bonell rubbed the wheel with his webbed right hand, pale eyes tracking a Braavosi sailor being beaten by a man from the Three Sisters. "On Sweet Sister Island we follow my uncle's orders," he said with a crooked smile. "But at sea, only the Storm, the child of the Wave Lady and the Sky Lord, knows whom to obey." Arthur strolled up to a table made from stacked barrels where a rough crowd was gambling and flicked a silver stag into the pile. "How's this wrestling decided?" he asked the man running the game, watching a beaten Braavosi groan on the deck. "I heard that lad crying for mercy." "One match begins, one match ends," the host answered, his yellow teeth flashing. "Whoever can still stand is the winner. Northerner, are you betting or entering the ring? If you enter, you can only bet on yourself." Arthur flexed his wrists, then looked down at the downed Braavosi. "You can tell what I'll do by how I'm dressed, can't you? Let the lad be treated. There's no sport in hitting someone who can't fight back. And betting?" Arthur shook his head and smiled. "If I keep betting on myself, this ship will be lost to me and your lord will be displeased." The remark fell through the crowd like cold water on hot oil. Most of the Braavosi had been sent below to row. The crowd on deck was mostly islanders from the Three Sisters. They hissed and muttered. Arthur raised his voice. "I'm not betting. Whoever can beat me in wrestling takes this silver stag." "According to your rules, who goes first?" he asked. "I'll go. I'll beat the Northerner to a pulp. Let me fight him." "Who'll take him?" Shouts rose. They didn't take the young-faced Northerner seriously. More than one hot head nearly came to blows for the chance. At last, Zon Bonell stepped forward to control them. By the old rules, he announced, Dumpling Ear, the same islander who'd been beating the Braavosi earlier, had precedence and would be Arthur's opponent. The old bookmaker took bets, almost all for Dumpling Ear. A few Braavosi, driven by debts, were forced to throw their coins on Arthur. The islanders voiced their approval with curses and the clinking of copper stars and silver stags. "Northern boy," someone spat. Don't end up like that dead Bravosi dog, lying there with his eyes gone. Dumpling Ear himself was squat and heavily muscled, limbs like clubbed posts. He cracked his knuckles and grinned. I won't go easy on you just because you tossed a silver stag. You want the coin? Then first you have to beat me. Arthur's eyes fell on Dumpling Ear's ears, puffy, misshapen, evidence not of birth, but of continual injury and recovery from years of wrestling. That detail made Arthur more cautious. Wrestling on a ship was different from on land. The rolling sea could unbalance the best of fighters. Dumpling Ear struck first, not with a grappling feint, but with a coarse palm slap aimed at Arthur's face. Had it landed cleanly, it would have been both injurious and humiliating. Arthur ducked and sidestepped, closed the distance, and wrapped his arms around the man's waist. He didn't bother with tricks. Feeling his opponent's body, he lowered his center of gravity and shifted straight into a grapple. He did not activate naked body this time. He wanted to test his own strength and core. They wrestled for half a minute, Dumpling Ear's face flushed with effort. He tried to use the ship's roll to throw Arthur, but Arthur continually absorbed and redirected the force, like grappling a gnarled sentinel tree. After that test, Arthur knew how their strengths compared. He wanted not just to win, but to win spectacularly. When Dumpling Ear leaned again to press his advantage, Arthur let go, took a breath, and unleashed himself. Naked body, he roared. Naked body grants enhanced agility and double strength while the upper body is bare. On the day after using the skill, only one basic card may be used. Arthur's arms swelled, his bare torso tightened like hammered stone. With horrified gasps from the crowd, he lifted Dumpling Ear as if hoisting a torn sack, raising the islander high above his head. Ignoring Dumpling Ear's frantic thrashing, Arthur spun once and then drove him against a nearby mast with both hands. The impact thudded through the deck. Dumpling Ear collapsed, writhing, clutching his belly, unable to rise. Arthur didn't gloat. He walked over, offered a hand, and asked, "Do you surrender?" I surrender." Dumpling Ear curled up, covering his head, teeth clenched. The expected kick didn't come. "I don't strike a man who's down and has yielded," Arthur said. Dumpling Ear glanced at the offered hand, confusion and pain warring in his eyes. He gritted his teeth, forced himself upright, and accepted the help. He straightened slowly, still pressing his side. "You're a man," he said gruffly. Arthur looked surprised. "Do you still want to continue?" Dumpling Ear shook his head. "I already surrendered. I've hurt my ribs. I need a meister." Dumpling Ear was clearly one of the Storm's best wrestlers. Arthur's brutal, head-on defeat of him left many from the Three Sisters Islands nursing the sting of lost bets and a new respect for the Northerner. For the second match, a lot of Islanders put their money on Arthur again, even though his opponent was the ship's captain, Zahn Bonell. "I'm very curious. Why would my uncle believe what you said?" Zahn, who shared his uncle Lord Goderich's tall, broad build, asked. "He's never liked Northerners. He hates bastards even more." Arthur smiled faintly. Bare-chested, sitting on a wooden barrel, he waved to a man nearby from the Three Sisters. The man, knowing his place, handed him a cup of rum. "House Stark's motto, 'Winter is coming,' has been spoken in the North for generations," Arthur said, taking a gulp and frowning at the rum's sour, spicy bite. "Your uncle is pragmatic. He may doubt my words, but he trusts the weight of House Stark. Northerner, don't think your name means anything on the high seas." Zahn wrapped his wrists with cloth strips for the fight. He watched Arthur drink, anger flashing in his eyes. "I don't care who you are or how much you've had to drink. My ancestor Roderick Stark once won Bear Island in a wrestling match against the Ironborn," Arthur said, holding up his wooden cup and sweeping a hand toward the onlookers. "That inspired me. I'm no great wrestler, but I want the people on this ship to respect me. If I beat you, will you keep quiet and listen?" "Let strength speak," Zahn said. He swung his fists once more, pulled on a leather jerkin, and adopted a serious stare. "I suppose you've had enough rest. Come on, then." Arthur set down his cup and shrugged. His fight with Dumpling Ear had shown him what naked body did. His physical attributes had become monstrous. Speed, agility, strength. He believed he could beat anyone in an unarmed match. Old Yellowtooth collected the bets and called the bout to start. "Captain, show this Northerner what the people of the Three Sisters are made of," shouted someone. "You must win. I bet my fortune on you." Zahn moved first, showing nimbleness that belied his size. He threw powerful punches and kicks aimed at vital points, each blow cutting the air. But he always pulled back after striking, wary of Arthur's strength and afraid of being caught. Thuds and grunts filled the deck, and the crowd's cheers never stopped. Arthur played the part of a hard-fought contest. He mostly defended and parried, only occasionally countering, and he avoided hitting Zahn's face. He kept his blows to the captain's torso, where the leather jerkin would take the impact. Even so, a front kick from Arthur left a shoe print on Zahn's breastplate. Zahn, finally exhausted, clutched his chest and went still. Arthur ignored him. "From now on, no one on this ship can be forced into wrestling," he declared, laying down a simple rule. "When someone falls and yields in a match, the wrestling stops immediately. I don't like attacking the fallen. If anyone has a problem with that, they can talk to me." He squeezed his fists and added with a hard smile, "or to my fists." He handed over a few gold dragons to the ship's first mate and told him to buy wine and meat as a reward for the crew once they reached Braavos, and to let everyone relax before returning to their cabins. The first mate dispersed the crowd, pocketed the winnings and Arthur's gold, and helped Zahn to his feet. Zahn was breathing hard, the breath rattling in his chest. When he tossed Dumpling Ear out, you should have known you couldn't beat him, the first mate said as he patted the captain to help him breathe. "I thought he was just strong," Zahn admitted between gasps. "I didn't expect him to be so good with technique and so fast." He glanced at the shoe print on his chest. "Who would have thought? He's a monster." In the captain's cabin, Zahn peeled off the jerkin to reveal a tall, battered body, bruises dark and spreading, his chest red and swollen. The first mate ordered a medic from the Three Sisters to rub ointment into the worst spots, and to them he said quietly, "I think he held back against both you and Dumpling Ear. We'll have to be more honest with him or change how we deal with him." "If I had to fight him again, I still would," Zahn said, taking another swallow of rum. "If I don't even have the courage to fight, how can I command my men?" The medic clicked his tongue inside his cheek as he worked. When had these rough, illiterate smugglers started worrying about fairness? The world felt a little different now. After the wrestling match and Arthur's rule, conditions aboard eased a bit for the Braavos crew. Arthur spent more time on deck, stretching and sharpening his skills. He used simple cards, kill and flash, to accelerate his wrestling practice and to spar with the sailors who loved the sport. He worked to connect with the Three Sisters Islanders, getting along with them in every sense. He paid particular attention to the man who had first threatened him, making sure the man was looked after and had enough to eat. Arthur's training wasn't limited to one-on-one fights. Sometimes he sparred against several opponents and often told stories about his family, like how his ancestor won Bear Island with wrestling. He began inviting people from both the Three Sisters and Braavos to dinner. Dumpling Ear would argue technique with him. The ship's first mate talked navigation, where the hidden reefs lay, which lighthouses were misleading, and how to run goods past the customs of White Harbor and Gulltown. Zahn Bonell told Arthur the old tale of the 1,000-year struggle between the Wolf King of the North and the Falcon of the Vale for the Three Sisters, why his uncle Goderich and the Islanders so disliked Northerners. When speaking with the Braavosi, Arthur used Braavosi, the local dialect of High Valyrian, and he picked it up quickly thanks to his grounding in High Valyrian. The Braavos sailors, worried about friends and relatives, still held on Sweet Sister Island, and they resented the bullying they'd suffered from the Three Sisters crew on board. The Braavosi captain, Victa, was Arthur's main interlocutor. Victa explained the narrow sea's currents and how seasonal storms and climate shifts affected sailing. "The narrow sea throws a lot at you," he warned. "Winter storms are fiercest, autumn storms most frequent. Lucky for us, it's spring and summer now. This voyage would have been far harder otherwise." Victa also passed on practical knowledge of maritime trade and customs. When trading in Westeros, cultivate relationships with local lords. In the free cities, get to know the customs officials, or they'll inspect you to death, maybe even seize your cargo. "At the end of the day, bribery works almost everywhere," Victa said quietly, "except with bandits." Chapter 23. Braavos. Look, there's the Titan of Braavos. Victa stood at the bow of the storm and pointed into the thick fog where two bright lights burned. Bravos is ringed by islands and heavy mist, he said. Only the natural channel beneath the Titan lets ocean-going ships into the harbor. Arthur, seeing Bravos for the first time, and the others from the Three Sisters watched where Victa directed them. The enormous statue of the Titan loomed out of the fog, his legs straddling the channel, each foot planted on a separate sea stack. Broad shoulders lay across the ragged peaks. The stone of his legs matched the rough black granite of the stacks. Around his waist hung a green-bronze battle skirt. His breastplate and half-helm were bronze, and his hair was thick ropes of hemp dyed green. His eyes were two caverns in which great fires burned. The light Arthur had seen in the fog came from those eyes. From the front, the breastplate and exposed belly of the Titan were perforated with dozens of murder holes. One bronze hand rested on the nearer ridge, its fingers wrapped around a hulking rock. The other arm reached skyward, clutching the hilt of a broken sword. As the storm steered into the harbor, Arthur could see even more murder holes beneath the bronze skirt on the inner thighs, packed close and dark with the cold glint of metal arrowheads. The crew from the Three Sisters, unused to such sights, drew in their necks, and some slipped back into the cabin with nervous looks. They cleared the channel and entered a broad lagoon. Ahead, another sea stack rose like a spiked fist. Its rocky battlements bristled with trebuchets, ballistae, and fire-spitting crossbows. "This is Bravos' arsenal," Victa said with pride. He told those on deck, "They can build a warship here in a single day." Two small rowboats came paddling from either side of the sea stack. "Who wishes to travel to Bravos?" The men in the boats called in Bravosi. "Victa of Bravos and his friends," Victa answered in the same tongue. "My other ship, the Wavebreaker, was wrecked in the Three Sisters and sank. I am returning on the storm." "What cargo is the storm carrying?" one of the boatmen asked. "Mostly timber. I know the way to the checkered quay. We need not be followed." The men in the boats nodded. "All men must die," they intoned in Bravosi. "All men must serve," Victa replied, tapping his brow lightly. "You must go to the checkered quay for inspection by the Sea King's customs," one of the small boat captains said. After the formalities, Victa warned Zahn Bonell, who was at the helm. They usually spend half a day unloading holds and writing up the manifests. Since his fight with Arthur, Zahn had stopped making things difficult for Victa. He'd even begun to pick up Bravosi from him, taking to practical phrases the way his uncle Count Godric had taught him to take to business. Arthur had taught him a few coarse words too, useful, sharp things for passing moments. Guided by Victa, the storm was soon at the checkered quay. "Lower a skiff," Arthur said. "We'll go ashore first." He turned to Zahn. "Want to come? Let Victa and your first mate deal with the customs." Zahn hesitated, then nodded. He told the crew to obey the first mate and make no trouble. Victa assigned a young man to guide them. Arthur and Zahn sat in the stern of the skiff while Dumpling Ear and their guide rowed. The guide's name was Pete. On the Wavebreaker, he was called Accountant Pete or Ledger Pete. He kept the cargo lists and tallied the manifests for Victa. Pete was a Westerosi by birth, raised in Flea Bottom in King's Landing, and had a memory for numbers. "Zahn, what do you make of it?" Arthur asked as the city drew nearer, the first real city he'd seen in this world of ice and fire. "Is this what you expected Bravos to be?" Zahn's mouth twitched. He had not expected to come here. "It's magnificent. It's the largest city I've ever seen." He took in the domes, towers, and bridges, gray, gold, and red, stretching across 100 islands. "Port cities like White Harbor and Gulltown are closed by walls," Pete said, glancing nervously at Dumpling Ear. "But here there are no walls, only ships, and more ships." "We're going north of the harbor," Pete went on. "There's a deep channel. We can row right into the city center." Dumpling Ear, who had once badly beaten Pete after Pete had yielded to him in a wrestle, leered at the memory. Once Arthur had thumped Dumpling Ear into his senses, the islanders had learned to shout surrender faster than anyone. Zahn's eyes flicked over the tall gray stone houses that lined the canals, 4 and 5 stories high, but he didn't lose sight of why they were here. "Both your uncle and I are seeing this place for the first time. How do we bring him more shipwrecks without risking discovery and punishment?" "Bravos has an insurance industry," Pete said. "Insurance?" Zahn and Dumpling Ear heard the word for the first time. Sailing is dangerous. Storms, reefs, Pete explained. In Braavos, many captains or shipowners go to an insurance merchant before they sail. They pay gold and sign a paper. If the ship is lost to storm or reef, the merchant pays the full value of ship and cargo. Zahn considered that. Dumpling Ear spat in disgust. Pay gold for paper? Only a fool would do that. You can think of it like the wrestling bets you're good at, Arthur said to Dumpling Ear. The captain and the insurance merchant are two parties placing a wager. The captain hopes the merchant never has to pay. Why? Dumpling Ear asked. Zahn answered quietly, because if they have to pay, it means the ship's gone, and often the crew with it, Arthur finished. He dipped his hand into the cold water, letting the chill touch his fingers. The sea is dangerous, especially in autumn and winter, as Victa said, but a captain facing a storm can at least take some comfort in a Braavosi contract. He knows his wife and children won't be left in want. Signing the paper is one thing, getting paid is another, Pete added. If Captain Victa and you, Lord Arthur, didn't return, who knows whether the insurance merchant would honor the claim and pay widows and orphans? Perhaps you've heard the Braavosi saying, Arthur said. The Iron Bank never fails to collect. Pete nodded. That's true, and it's not just the Iron Bank's gold. It's the Sea King's gallant purple fleet, the mercenary companies the bank hires, and the faceless men of the House of Black and White who make sure their debts are paid, or that those who refuse pay in other ways. Chapter 24, Insurance. I've heard of the faceless men. People say they're the best assassins in the world. Dumpling Ear, who was rowing behind them, sat up straighter. He'd finally heard something he recognized. They say they can change into 1,000 faces. Pete drew his shoulders up and muttered, Valar Morghulis. But what has any of that to do with us? Zahn asked, pragmatic as ever, steering the conversation back. We can't always do what we did this time, hold the captain's son and drag him to Braavos to find an insurance merchant to cash the policy, can we? Without a hostage, or if the captain is cruel, or if the merchant smells a rat and reports us, we're stuck in Braavos. The mention of the Titan and the arsenal had clearly shaken Zahn. Arthur smiled. You're thinking small. Your uncle, Count Godric, isn't only thinking about salvaging ships for profit, he's thinking of how not to end up on the gallows. But the insurance trade isn't run by one man. There's competition. Arthur waved a hand to cut Zahn off and leaned in. He no longer bothered to hide his plan. We pick an insurance merchant to cooperate with. He feeds us the routes of other merchants' ships. In return, we spare his ships and sink the ships of his rivals. We send the survivors, the captains and crews, back to him so he can honor their contracts. Other insurance houses will either refuse to pay and lose face, or they'll raise premiums for ships bound for White Harbor. Arthur saw the confusion in Zahn's face and broke it down further. Your uncle gets accurate information about vessels sailing from Braavos to White Harbor. Remember our 101can.cc website? The insurance merchant we work with gets a pricing advantage and can gain market share. The unlucky crews of the sunk ships might even get another chance to sail. At least their lives won't be forfeit. It's a win-win-win. Understanding finally clicked. Zahn slapped his thigh with his webbed hand and began to expand on the plan. We could offer convoy and escort services, even repairs for the partnered merchants' ships. Arthur smiled, pleased that Zahn saw the kernel of it. He also knew that ideas were easy. Execution was full of hazards. Cooperation requires trust, even when that trust is driven by self-interest. The people of the Three Sisters hadn't known about insurance before, and even if they did now, language and identity would be barriers. Braavosi insurers would never trust a distant pirate lord and a gang of salvagers, at least not without convincing reasons. Arthur had the advantage. He spoke Braavosi and had Count Godric's authorization. That gave him a leverage the locals lacked. He intended to exploit the information gap. The small boat slid on down the long canal toward the city center. Zahn relaxed now that his questions had been answered and turned to take in Braavos. What's that raised canal for? He asked, pointing to the massive gray stone aqueduct spanning the city, held up by 3-stepped arches. Is that another waterway? Can we go up and see? That's the Sweetwater Canal, Pete said. It brings fresh water in from the mainland across marshes and shallows. The wealthy pipe it straight into their homes. The poor fetch it from public fountains. The water in the city channels is salt. You can't drink it without boiling carefully. Arthur smiled wryly. No matter the city, the cut of rich and poor was the same. Speaking of the rich, he said, remembering what Victa had told him, the wealthy and the good swordsmen here tend to wear dark, black clothes. We should buy some black clothes later, he added. Dumpling Ear frowned. Why do rich folk like black here? He blurted out what came to mind. The Night's Watch wear black on the wall. Most of them used to be thieves or worse. I thought I'd wear black after watching adult Stannis hang a band of smugglers on Sweet Sister Island, Zahn said with an odd, rueful pride. I didn't expect rich people to wear black too. Assassins here, on the other hand, dress in the fanciest, flashiest gowns, Pete said, glancing at the darkening sky. In Braavos, if you walk the streets at night with a sword, people might take that as a challenge. That's an interesting rule. Arthur touched the sword at his hip. He liked the prick of novelty. I'm starting to like it here. They passed under the Sweetwater Canal and rounded a corner. Tall stone statues lined both banks, solemn figures in bronze robes stained with seabird droppings. Some held books, some daggers, some hammers. One raised a gold star to the sky. Another tipped a stone wine jug so water flowed continuously into the canal. Are those gods? Zahn asked. Sweet Sister has statues of the Wave Lady and the Lord of the Sky, but those are tiny compared to these. They're the Sea Kings of old, Pete replied. We're still passing the Isle of Gods. 6 more bridges to go. On the right bank is the grandest temple of Braavos, the Temple of the Moon Singers. They say the Moon Singers guided the first Braavosi to this island. The temples of the 7 gods here are called the Outer Sanctuaries. The Wave Lady and the Lord of the Sky you're used to worshipping, you'll find them in the shelter. Braavos keeps a lot of small, forgotten gods there. Before they passed under the third arch, Arthur saw the temple Pete spoke of, a palace of pure white marble with a great silver dome and windows of milky glass that showed the moon's phases. Marble maidens the size of the Sea Kings supported crescent-shaped lintels beside every door. Even in his previous life, Arthur thought, this would have been a fine place to visit. Further on stood a red stone temple like a fortress, its square tower topped with an iron brazier 20 feet wide where a great flame roared. Smaller fires burned beside the bronze doors. The red priests like fire, Pete said, dutifully informing them. They worship the Lord of Light, the red god R'hllor. Arthur's thoughts turned dark at the memory. The red priests burned people, icons, and foreign faiths to please their god. In Westeros, aside from dragons, others, children of the forest, green seers, and skin changers, the Lord of Light's priests were among the few who showed true magic, fire visions, prophets, and those dubious resurrections. Next rose a moss-grown brick building that would have looked like a warehouse if not for Pete's voice. That's the sanctuary of the sheltered, or the Great Asylum, he said, a narrow channel cut through the high mossy walls. The boat slipped through a tunnel and into light again. Shrines crowded the banks on either side. Look, Dumpling Ear, Zahn called, standing up. Among the many shrines he could indeed find the deities he favored. The Wave Lady and the Lord of the Sky are worshipped here too. They passed under another bridge, and a rocky knoll rose on the left. Atop it sat a windowless dark gray temple, the steps from its entrance dropping down to a covered dock. That's the House of Black and White, Pete said, eyes lifted toward the building for a moment before he lowered them and began to row faster than before. The Temple of the Many-Faced God. It's also the headquarters of the Faceless Men. Chapter 25. Out of Nothing. Braavos had 2 main docks for merchant ships. The Purple Port, north of the city beneath the high towers and domes of the Sea King's Palace, was for locals only. The Old Clothes Market dock, to the west, handled foreign merchant traffic. After its inspection at the Checkerboard dock, the Storm was now berthed at the Old Clothes Market. Compared to the Purple Port, this dock was simpler, rougher, dirtier, and louder. Braavos had grown from shipping, and the streets around the Old Clothes Market dock were full of people eking out a living. Stevedores, rope makers, shipwrights, tavern keepers, brewers, bakers, actors, prostitutes servicing sailors, and of course beggars. On the Storm's bow that night, Arthur stood in a newly bought black silk robe that made him melt into the darkness. He had set out to sightsee, but the tour had unlocked several strategy cards on the Three Kingdoms kill system panel. He stared at the panel and read the newly available cards and their effects one by one. Take something from nothing. Use 2 arbitrary cards again, or choose to increase the magic within your body. Power consumed increases with the number of uses in a day. Invulnerable. Nullify 1 magic effect on yourself or a person you touch. Remove the bridge after crossing. Look directly into an opponent's eyes and strip a designated magic unit of the magic it will cast next. Take advantage of opportunity. Steal a magic unit's magic and gain the right to use it once. Must touch the body with a hand. Know yourself and know your enemy. Read a portion of the selected target's memories. Requires one of the target's eyes. Arthur's mind raced with possibilities. Did a dragon count as a magic unit? If he used take advantage of opportunity on a dragon, could he breathe dragon fire? Could he become a dragon himself? If dragon fire was magic, could vulnerable grant immunity to it? Could he become the unburnt? Know yourself and know your enemy was a powerful intelligence tool, but it could be used on the same person only twice. Remove the bridge after crossing was an even more godlike silencing skill. If it worked on magic already in motion, a single glance could render an army of whites helpless by stripping the Night King's power. Still, Arthur couldn't forget what happened the first time he used the strategy card, Oath of the Peach Garden. He had been utterly drained and lain like a corpse for 7 days. That memory tempered his eagerness. Among the new cards, the one Arthur prized most was Take Something from Nothing. For him, the name was literal. It could create something from nothing. It not only removed the 2-card-per-day limit, it could also boost his internal magic and reduce the physical toll of using strategy cards. He was still weighing whether to try it that night when Victa found him on the bow. "How is Bravos?" Victa asked. His face had lost the worry it had worn earlier. The slight hunch that had come from the sinking of his wavebreaker had straightened. He sounded proud. "This is the greatest mercantile city-state since the fall of the Valyrian freehold and the rise of the 9 free cities." Arthur listened as Victa reminded him of the old history. Valyria had once been an empire of dragons, over 300 at its height, until the doom of Valyria destroyed it. Only the Targaryens survived, thanks to Daenerys Targaryen, the dreamer who foresaw the doom and convinced her family to leave 12 years before the catastrophe. "It's excellent in every sense," Victa went on. "I like it here. You could call it my lucky place." "You look the part," Arthur replied, glancing at his black silk robe. Victa beamed. "I already sent word to the insurance merchant I made an agreement with. I arranged to meet him tomorrow morning." Arthur had told Victa of his plan for the insurance claim. Victa's face changed. He had hoped the payout might free his detained sons and crew on Sweet Sister Island. Arthur had expected gratitude or leverage, so he spoke gently. "This isn't a test," Arthur said. "You were my passenger, even if you didn't take me to my destination. From our journey, you should know what kind of man I am. That money will be yours as the start of our trust." Victa hesitated, then nodded. "I don't want the money. I want my sons and the crew freed." He pointed to hawkers ferrying seafood from boat to boat. "I'll probably settle here, buy a small boat and be a fisherman. My sons can sell clams, mussels, shrimp, make a living. You don't need to worry about them. Count Godric is a practical man. When he sees the value we bring, he'll release them." Arthur rested his elbow on the ship's rail. "From now on, I want you to listen to me." Victa thought for a long time, then gritted his teeth. "From now on, I'll listen. I want you to know I admire your seamanship. I'll be your captain." Arthur smiled. Over the past days, he'd come to respect Victa, an experienced seaman who cared for his crew. He had a plan and needed people who could be relied on. "My uncle is the Duke of Winterfell, the Warden of the North," Arthur explained. "I have a manor in Winterfell. It produces a high-quality peach wine and processed planks. I want you to run a route between White Harbor and Bravos, shipping those goods." "Peach wine and planks?" Victa tapped his chin. "Bravos is short on good timber. Planks should sell well. But this peach wine, how good is it?" There were almost no trees on Bravos. Firewood arrived by barge, and the pines around the city were preserved as windbreaks. Cutting them was forbidden. Timber was expensive, especially the good planks for ships. Even dung that burned was bought and hoarded. I drank plum wine on your wave breaker, Arthur said. The peach wine I'm talking about is far better than that. And the profit split? Victa asked. You'll pay directly to Winterfell for the first purchase of planks and wine, Arthur said, holding up a finger. I'll make sure they don't charge you on the first run. I won't interfere with your selling price. I will take 3/10 of the profit. Victa made an awkward face. 3/10? That's too much. It should be at least 50-50. Sailing across the narrow sea is risky. I've seen it, Arthur said, and you're not getting those 7/10 for nothing. When the time comes, I may requisition ships. You must not refuse. How could I refuse? Victa pounded his chest. Your kindness is something my sons and I can never repay. Arthur believed people were steadier when motivated by self-interest. Share the profits, share the risks. That was the code he wanted to build here. He had settled on taking 3/10 because it left enough for his partners, while ensuring he could mobilize resources when needed. Besides the shipping profits, Arthur's main income would come from the Wolfswood Peach Garden upstream. Before he left, it had been agreed he would receive half the garden's income. With the deal forming and Victa on board, Arthur's plan to establish a foothold in Braavos was beginning to take shape. Chapter 26, Insurance Merchant Wavebreaker. After breakfast, oyster chowder and a few slices of buckwheat bread, Arthur followed Victa to meet the insurance merchant. Zon Bonell and account book Pete went with them. Arthur had specifically asked Pete to come. He intended to bring him under his wing. The insurance merchant who signed the contract with me is Shable Caffey, Victa said as he climbed into the small boat. He's Braavosi and a greedy fat man. Greed is better than no appetite or no sense, Arthur replied, slipping into the black silk garments he'd bought the day before as he boarded. We need someone with good intelligence gathering. He was in this business when I was still a sailor, Victa said. With everyone aboard, he shoved off with an oar, and the little boat made its slow way north. He lost an eye a few years back, but his powers of observation are sharper than they used to be. Account book. Pete knows Shable too, Pete added. He always says that I was willfully blind. They arranged to meet at a soup shop near Purpleport, a place that smelled of onions and meat broth. On the third floor, Arthur found the man Victa had described. Shable Caffey was everything Victa had promised, obese and round, slumped in a soft chair, bald except for gray hair at the temples. His right eye was a sunken, sightless socket. He wore loose, dark silk, and his fingers were ringed with gemstones. A servant dabbed at gravy on his clothes, while 2 identical guards stood behind him. At his feet, a stout bulldog, Claws, was gobbling from a bowl piled high with meat and fish. Victa, my friend, I thought I'd never see you again. Shable wiped his brow and smiled, though the smile did not reach the blind eye. 5 empty bowls clustered on the table beside him. You sound like you didn't want me back, Victa said, drawing a parchment from his breast and laying it on the table. When I was on Sweet Sister Island, I dreamed of your face. You dreamed of my money, didn't you? Shable's grin stayed fixed. His blind pupil, white-tinged, gave him a slightly dangerous look. The bulldog barked at Arthur, stopping only when Arthur frowned and took 2 deliberate steps back. Claws is very sensitive to unfamiliar scents, Shable explained, scooping the dog into his arms and rubbing its broad head. Then he peered at Arthur. Although you wear black, you're not Braavosi. I'm blind in one eye, but my nose is better than most. You're from the Sunset Kingdom, aren't you? Where people in black are Night's Watch, not lords. He had learned the details from his network. Arthur sat and got straight to business, speaking in Braavosi. Besides fulfilling the contract, we are here to discuss cooperation. I hope we can speak alone. You speak Braavosi, and you want to cooperate? Shable hesitated a moment, then waved his attendants away. He wanted to see what this man from the Sunset Kingdom was up to. Arthur delivered the same pitch he'd given to Zon, Pete, and Dumpling Ear the day before, an insurance scheme that would profit both sides. Shable listened, content to play with Claws, asking nothing while Arthur explained. A good idea, Shable finally said, a shrewd light in his single eye. Are you from the 3 Sisters? A pirate? My name is Arthur Snow from the North, Arthur answered truthfully. As Victa said, I was a passenger on his ship. I wasn't meant to be here. Shable looked puzzled. Then how do you speak Bravosi so well? You claim to represent the Lord of the Three Sisters. How do you prove it? Arthur raised the parchment. Isn't this proof enough? And outside is the nephew of the Three Sisters, Lord. You can see the webbing between his fingers, the family marker. Shable considered the arrangement Arthur described and found no obvious flaws. How will this operate? How will the profits be divided? You provide a house in Bravos with a blacksmith's shop as a contact point, Arthur explained. I'll connect with your people there. With information from your network, we'll coordinate with the Three Sisters to execute the plan. The goods and ship remain the Three Sisters' property. The Bravosi side provides insurance coverage but does not participate in the cargo. We'll handle transporting the crew and captain from the wreck and return them to Bravos on ordinary merchant ships. That's an ongoing expense. The blacksmiths is just a front, Arthur added calmly. This business isn't exactly honorable. Having a plausible cover for a long time benefits us both. All right. Shable shifted, put claws down, and adopted a negotiator's posture. Why should I provide the house, and why a blacksmith? It's a long-term cost to ferry people back and forth, Arthur said. You lend the house free of charge. We operate through it. That keeps things discreet. Shable nodded. I will provide the house, but it will be lent to you for free. Agreed. Arthur pushed the parchment toward Shable. As a basis for mutual trust, I expect the contract to be honored. On the parchment, the value of the wavebreaker and the goods aboard had been estimated at roughly 3,500 gold dragons in Westerosi currency. Shable frowned. No, I can only pay half, he said firmly. In Bravos, that's an unwritten rule in the insurance trade. Victa knows it. I don't accept unwritten rules, Arthur said, standing as if to go. I want partners who honor contracts. For a moment, it looked like he would leave. Then Shable stood for the first time, hands braced against his round belly, his face flushing with sudden irritation. Damn it, you keep denying you're from the Three Sisters, but you act just like them, he snapped, then composed himself. No, I'll arrange for someone to pay the contract in full as soon as possible. Pleasure doing business? Arthur asked coolly. Pleasure doing business. Shable echoed, then fixed Arthur with a long, appraising look with his one good eye. Chapter 27, Letter-Writing Genius. Inside Winterfell's Great Hall, Maester Luwin entered with 3 letters in hand. My lord, the rookery received 3 letters this morning. I thought you should see them yourself, he said, setting the parchment down. They're from Arthur, 1 for you, 1 for John, and 1 for Robb, sent from White Harbor. Arthur? Eddard Stark exhaled softly. So he reached the Free Cities safely. Maester Luwin pushed the letters toward him. You should read them first. Eddard frowned at the Maester's unusual tone and opened the first letter. To my dear Uncle Eddard Stark, by the time you read this, my ship and I will have passed under the Titan of Bravos. My people should be in Bravos across the narrow sea, and unless something unexpected happens, I will be staying there a while. I changed my plans because of a storm. The purple-sailed Bravosi ship I was on ran aground and sank near Sweet Sister Island in the Three Sisters. Fortunately, Count Godric was hospitable. His men rescued me and the crew and helped the captain salvage what they could from the wreck. I ate a local dish called Sister Stew beneath his roof. It was delicious. It's nothing like those old wet nurse stories. The stew is mostly 3 kinds of crab. There are no sisters inside. Count Godric wanted to send me back to White Harbor and leave the crew as guests on the island, but I told him I meant to cross to the Free Cities. I persuaded him to have the captain take me to Bravos. The captain, Victa, does much shipping across the narrow sea. He told me Bravos is a place of great shipbuilding, so much so that cutting trees is forbidden. Even firewood must be barged in. I thought that was perfect for finding a market for the peach wine and the planks we make at Peach Orchard Residence. Wait for good news. Your sensible nephew, Arthur Snow. Arthur went to Bravos? Eddard's frown deepened. His long, serious face tried to stay composed, but failed. Godric is hospitable? What nonsense is this? There is one addressed to John as well, Maester Luwin said, offering the next letter. You may want to decide whether to show it to John. Eddard took the second letter with a wary look and read. To my dear cousin, Jon Snow, by the time you read this, the ship I am on will have passed beneath the Titan of Bravos. The Titan's eyes glow like stars, and when he roars, the sound carries across the city. He's so tall he could step over the inner and outer walls of Winterfell in a single stride, if he could move, that is. I was a guest on the Sister Islands after a terrible storm. Count Godric hosted me kindly. He told me he had met Uncle during the War of the Usurper. Well, I suppose they call it Robert's Rebellion now. But he said Uncle was brought to Sweet Sister Island too. A fisherman carried him across the bight, but the fisherman drowned. His daughter somehow got Uncle to the sisters before the ship went down. It said Uncle left her a full bag of silver and got her with child. She named the boy Jon Snow after Lord Jon Arryn. I don't know if any of that is true, but it sounds like something from a book, beauty saving a hero and offering herself in marriage. It's romantic. I was quite taken. Your talkative cousin, Arthur Snow. 7 hells! Eddard's face flushed crimson. He balled the letter up in his hand. What is wrong with this boy? How could he believe Godric's tales? That bald bandit of a lord. That rumor seems unlikely, Maester Luwin said, tucking his hands into his sleeves, a slight lift to one brow. Though the letter doesn't mention Godric's baldness. Eddard glared. Good Maester, pretend you never saw this. What shall we do with the letter? Luwin asked, shrinking back a little. Arthur and Jon are close. He wrote to you, but he wrote one to Jon too. You may want to show it. Eddard sighed, smoothed the crumpled paper, and read the lines again. The part about a beauty saving a hero made him blush anew. He carefully folded the letter at the telling passage. Maester Luwin produced a pair of scissors from his sleeve and said, Shall I read the one Arthur wrote to Robb? Let me see, Eddard said. Since he'd read the others, he might as well finish them. He skimmed the last letter. To my dear cousin Robb Stark, by the time you read this, I shall be settled in a courtyard in Braavos provided by an insurance merchant. You don't know how dangerous a voyage to Braavos can be. It's summer now, so storms are rare on the narrow sea, but the people from the Three Sisters like to wrestle. Our ancestor Roderick Stark took Bear Island by wrestling the Ironborn. Perhaps island folk have that in their blood. I wrestled with them nearly every day on the way to Braavos, as we practiced swordplay each morning. Later, they grew less fond of wrestling with me, though. It made me miss practicing with you and Jon in Winterfell very much. Your cousin Arthur Snow, who misses you terribly. This one is more sensible, Eddard said, the lines easing from his face. Maester Luwin, do you understand what these insurance merchants do? I studied the trade at the Citadel, Luwin said, sitting on a stool and trimming the edges of the letters. They exist in the free cities. They sell contracts to captains. If a ship is lost to storm or pirates, the insurer guarantees compensation for ship and cargo. Luwin pursed his lips. My lord, you know well the terror of storms. Don't remind me, Eddard muttered. Risk brings reward, Maester Luwin said, tossing the trimmings into the hearth. Braavos is one of the great ports. Ships to Braavos often bring large profits. We could try to find a market there for the excess peach wine and the planks piling in our warehouses. We'll put Wayne Poole to it, Eddard decided after a moment. Ship the planks, the peach wine, and the surplus furs to White Harbor. I will write to Wyman Manderley and ask him to clear some warehouses. In a manor grove near White Harbor, Vera Manderley came running through the trees, an envelope fluttering in her hand and her long braid swaying. Sister, Arthur Snow wrote to you, she cried. I think he's in love with you. Wilfilda Manderley, checking the peach tree's growth, watched Vera nearly stumble over a stone. Careful, you daft thing, she scolded gently. You're reckless as ever. Which nobleman will take a fancy to you if you keep this up? Vera giggled and presented the letter like a treasure. He wrote to you in less than 2 months after he left. He must be in love, sister. Wilfilda sighed, a rare sound. House Manderley had no male heir of her generation. She might well become its head. Arthur's bastard status made him unsuitable for marriage to her. Stop listening to the songs of that Florian and his friend Jonquil, she said, taking the letter from Vera and speaking with the authority of an older sister. Life isn't a song. You'll be disappointed if you think it is. Vera stuck out her tongue and quoted Florian's foolish line. Lovely miss, when it comes to women, which man isn't a fool? Which man isn't a knight? He's only 10, Wilfilda said, rubbing her sister's hair. He's a boy. Bastards grow quicker than other boys, Vera protested, wriggling free. Besides, which man didn't start as a boy? It had been over a month since Arthur reached an agreement with Sable Caffey. The contact point Sable had given him was near the old clothes market dock, a handsome mansion. It was a 4-story square house with water drawn directly from the Sweetwater Canal, and for the first time, Arthur experienced the comforts of a Braavosi gentleman. Like many Braavosi houses, it had no front yard. The back held stables, a small garden, and a fountain. The setting was pleasant, and Juying, Arthur's beloved horse, no longer had to live in the Storm's cabin. The front yard had been converted into a smithy to Arthur's specifications. Several Braavosi craftsmen were at work, and it would likely take another month to finish. Braavos's famous building trade, whether the canals, the Sea King's Palace of Truth, or the Temple of the Moonsingers, meant progress could be swift. Tools and raw materials were being gathered as well. Iron, tin, and lead were available from mining points on the continent, so supplies were never far off. Victa had used the money Sable Caffey provided to buy a brand new medium-sized 3-masted purple-sailed ship he named Reefbreaker. He planned to fill its hold with locally produced Braavosi textiles and sail them to White Harbor. Braavos had developed a thriving textile trade around a purple dye secreted by a local sea snail, which made the fabric valuable across the sea. "My hold's full. Plan to sail home soon," Zahn Bonnell told Arthur when he found him on the 4th floor of the mansion, accompanied by a handful of men. "I'll leave a few of these lads here. They'll listen to you." "They probably listen to whores and singers more than they do to me," Arthur muttered, eyeing the 5 disreputable Three Sisters men, wobbly sailors, more bluster than muscle. "Just don't stumble drunk into the wrong room and walk into that assassin's chamber. Then we'll see which is quicker, your head or the assassin's rapier." Those sailors had been holed up on the Three Sisters for a month and had seen something of Braavos's pleasure trade. The language barrier hadn't stopped them from learning the important words. In their dialect, the most useful Braavosi words were wine and kill. "We're simple folk," Zahn said, scratching his head with a nervous laugh as he waved the men off. "Hard to blame a man for a bit of indulgence. I told them to keep their bits in their britches." Arthur didn't linger. He took a sheaf of papers from the table. Sable Caffey's intelligence list of ships going from Braavos to White Harbor. The report was startlingly thorough. Times, personnel compositions, even contract details. Sable's knack for information gathered worried admiration out of Arthur. The one-eyed stout man reminded him of Varys, the master of whisperers. To Arthur, Sable's intelligence felt almost like sorcery. He translated the document into the Westerosi tongue and handed it to Zahn. "Take this to your uncle Count Godric. It's the agreement between him and me. I'll have Victa travel with you. When you reach Sweet Sister Island, release the detained hostage." Zahn skimmed the pages. "If we hand him back, will he rebel?" "He answers to me. He can be trusted. We'll need his ship to move people back to Braavos later," Arthur said. "This is meant to be a long-term cooperation, not a one-off. Trust has to go both ways." Arthur then summoned Victa, finalized travel details, and set the departure time. Of the 5 men Zahn left behind, Arthur asked that one, Dumpling Ear, be the head of the Three Sisters contingent and oversee the mansion's guard duties. Dumpling Ear had been sparring with Arthur lately and kept out of the general rowdiness. He was the pick of their bunch. Arthur also kept the household's account book, Pete to manage the mansion's day-to-day affairs, registers for material in and out, hiring, and purchasing necessities. He retained a few Braavosi sailors and 3 unwilling oarsmen who didn't wish to board ship again. Arthur hired them and put them under Pete's direction. That evening, Arthur invited everyone to dinner, as was his custom. Present were Pete and Dumpling Ear, representing Braavos and the Three Sisters. The meal was modest: minced meat with onions, a plate of scallops and oysters in hot sauce, square-cut dried fruit bread, a pot of fish cooked with mushrooms, and, of course, several jugs of ale. "We don't know this place," Dumpling Ear complained as he tore at the bread. "We can't speak their tongue. There's nothing to do." "They'd rather drink and visit whores all day," Pete grumbled. "But if they don't, what else is there for the brothers?" "Your job is guard duty. Protect the house, keep the thieves and cutthroats out. Be on your watch. You've only just arrived. Arthur took another spoonful of the mushroom fish soup. The pale broth was good, and he smacked his lips. When the smithy opens, you can learn to be blacksmiths if you like. But whether you like it or not, you must learn bravosi. That includes you, Dumpling Ear. Huh? Me? Dumpling Ear protested, lowering the bread he'd bitten several times. Tell me to hit someone. Tell me to kill. But don't tell me to learn that bird speech. This isn't a discussion. Zahn will probably require all 6 of you to stay in Bravos permanently. If you don't know the language, you'll be lost. Arthur dipped a piece of fruit bread into the minced meat. Pete, teach them. Start with common phrases. Pete forced a bitter smile and shucked an oyster. They don't listen to me. Dumpling Ear, you make them memorize 5 words a day. If they can't remember them, they'll come spar with me the next morning. Arthur shot a warning look at Dumpling Ear, who was making a show of intimidating Pete. I'll check on them at random. No funny business. All right, adult. Dumpling Ear gulped ale, bowed his head, and agreed. Pete then went over the fragmented list of supplies still to be procured. As the wine flowed, the conversation turned naturally to the women of Bravos. Arthur had read that Bravos's courtesans were famous across the world. Pete, with the memory of a ledger, rattled off their names like prized possessions. The Veiled Lady, the Mermaid Queen, the Moon Singer, the Daughter of the Dusk, the Nightingale, the Poetess, the 4 Black Pearls. He leaned forward, voice conspiratorial. Courtesans here are not like common whores. They have a high status. Each has her own pleasure boat and servants. The beauty of the famous ones inspires songs. Goldsmiths and craftsmen shower them with gifts. Nobles and rich merchants pay handsomely to have them at events. Even assassins fight and kill for them. Arthur laughed. Well, The courtesans were not only repositories of art and influence, but also patrons. He realized with a small private thrill that he could give those ladies swords forged in his smithy, swords that would make his shop's name famous. He swore. Despite his tall frame, he was still, in spirit, only 10 years old. He wanted only to give swords to make the smithy renowned, and nothing more. That night, Arthur stripped off his clothes, and the mermaid pendant from around his neck crawled beneath the velvet covers and closed his eyes. He had unlocked the strategy card, Take Something from Nothing, some time ago, but had never used it. There were many reasons for holding back. The main one was that he had urgent business in Bravos. He wasn't sure whether using Take Something from Nothing would carry side effects as severe as those he'd felt after swearing the oath of the Peach Garden. Now that his affairs were in order, he finally had the time to test it properly. He lay there with a tightness in his chest and after a moment's hesitation, invoked, Take Something from Nothing. Take Something from Nothing. You may reuse 2 arbitrary cards or choose to increase the magical power within your body. Note, using strategy cards consumes large amounts of magic power, energy, and physical strength. Use within your limits. Overuse may cause irreversible damage. The first thing to come was that odd, familiar dizziness and dull ache behind his eyes, followed by the draining fatigue in his limbs as if his life force were being siphoned off. Unlike the first time he'd pushed himself with a strategy card, he did not black out. That was a blessing and a curse. Because he remained conscious, he felt every twist of pain, like needles tearing through nerves, like an axe biting into bone. He wanted to cry out but could not muster the strength to open his mouth. Only a low, nasal groan slipped past his lips. The agony peaked and receded quickly. Just when he feared his pillow would be soaked with cold sweat, his head slumped and he fell into a deep sleep. In his dream, there was a great sword. It lay embedded in a white stone, its surface milky and luminous like glazed glass. Whenever Arthur focused his mind on the blade, he felt it tug at his consciousness, as if it were a magnet drawing him in. Inside the sword, the pressure eased. The headache and the roaring in his skull diminished. Each time he woke afterward, he felt drained, but better than the first time he had abused a strategy card. Then he had lain in bed for days. This time he could at least get up. He repeated the experiment every few days as his body recovered. Each time the same dream returned, the pale greatsword. Each time his mind slipped into it and found relief. Gradually, the side effects of using Take Something from Nothing lessened. Eventually, the stabbing pains disappeared and were replaced only by profound exhaustion. He had his own theory about the sword. All the Starks but Sansa had strong skin-changing talent, slipping into the minds of their direwolves, then to birds or small creatures, even into other people. Arthur had Stark blood in his veins and had once thought, at Winterfell, of trying to test that gift with an eagle or a hawk, but it had failed. Now something had awakened, though it was not the same wolf dreams of the Starks. He was slipping into a sword, the family blade of Ashara Dane, Dawn. Dawn's blade was unlike dark Valyrian steel. It glowed pale, almost like milk glass. The knights who bore it were known by the same epithet, Dawn's sword, and the previous Dawn's sword, Sir Arthur Dane, had been his uncle. The next time he used, take something from nothing, the dream opened on the sword again, but then the scene shifted. His view rose, revealing a tall tower of white stone. He seemed to enter the tower, and from inside the sword he could see the chamber where the blade rested. No windows, only walls of white and a single door. He did not know how long he hovered there before the door opened from outside. A crowd had gathered around a young man with pale, almost platinum hair and dark eyes. He wore the sigil of House Dane, a sword crossed with a falling star on a pale purple field, on his breastplate. The young man pulled Dawn free from the stone, and the people around him cheered. Arthur could not hear the shouts, only read their lips. The new Dawn sword, Sir Arthur Dane. Uncle, is this the past? Is this green sight? Only 1 in 1,000 are skin changers. Only 1 in 1,000 skin changers a green seer. Green seers see through weirwood and call it green sight. Arthur's thoughts were cut off as the world went black. When his vision returned, he saw 2 knights facing his uncle. One wore black plate with a red 3-headed dragon emblazoned on his chest in rubies. The other wore a griffin-shaped helm and armor split red and white. Rhaegar Targaryen and Jon Connington. He recognized them from the sigils and helmets. Rhaegar had been the Mad King's eldest, the prince who'd carried Lyanna Stark away and set those terrible events into motion. Connington had been Rhaegar's close friend and companion in arms. Arthur watched the 3 practice with blunt swords, a classic 1-on-2, in which all 3 moved with owned skill. Had they not been wearing heavy armor and using shields, any of them might have walked away bloodied. Watching their blade work was a lesson in itself. Arthur felt himself learn from the way they stepped and angled and recovered. Suddenly, the scene shattered like glass. When the fragments reassembled, the mood had changed. A ferocious knight, crazed with laughter, attacked Sir Arthur Dane. They traded blows and Dawn broke his opponent's blade. The man drew a second sword, but with a single, clean thrust, Dane pierced him through the belly. Then another figure knelt, a handsome blonde young man, flushed with excitement, and Dawn passed over his shoulders. He was raised a knight. Arthur knew him by sight, Jaime Lannister, a Kingsguard who later killed the king he'd sworn to protect. As Arthur tried to follow where the images would lead next, darkness fell again. When the darkness cleared, he opened his eyes on his velvet bed, roused by the roar of the Titan's horn. It was morning. Sweat had cooled on his forehead and soaked his clothes. After washing and a light breakfast, he went to the small garden to practice. He took up the yin-yang twin swords and felt something immediately wrong, and then terribly right. His left hand moved of its own accord with his familiar rapier style. Quick thrusts, sharp and wild. The broadsword in his right hand, however, moved with a maturity and weight that was not his. It was as if Sir Arthur Dane himself were guiding that blade, smooth, measured, devastatingly efficient. 2 styles clashed within him, and at first it felt jarring, like wearing ill-fitting armor. He did not resist. Instead, he used a kill card to accelerate his assimilation of the right-hand technique. He practiced until sweat blurred his vision, and the 2 styles began to meld. When he finally stopped, he felt, faint and far away, the presence of the great sword from his dreams, Dawn, like a distant thread tugging at his mind. "I thought your wrestling was already excellent," a voice said. "I didn't expect your swordsmanship to outshine it," Dumpling Ear added. "It's just accumulation," Arthur said, exhaling. "Did you memorize today's Bravosi words?" Dumpling Ear counted them on his fingers, delivering one after another in halting Bravosi. Masked, mermaid, moonshadow, gloom, nightingale, poet, black pearl. "I learned 2 more words today." You learned 2 more courtesans. Arthur shot him a look. Where are the others? They learned these 7 well, better than before. No problem. Dumpling Ear patted his chest. If every Bravosi word had a courtesan to match it, I swear my brothers would be fluent in a month. Arthur couldn't help but give him a playful kick. Still, it was a method that worked. Interest-driven learning was always better than rote memorization. Find the right entry point, and you often got twice the result for half the effort. After sending Dumpling Ear off, Arthur fetched a brush and groomed Jueying. The horse had grown taller and more splendid since leaving Winterfell. Its coat shone black as ink, and its neck was sleek as silk. Horses were scarce in Braavos. Canals and ships had replaced wide fields, so there were few chances to ride. He finished quickly and made his way to the Moon Pool by the Sea King's palace. The Moon Pool was the terminus of the Sweetwater Canal and a place of displays, of skill, of wealth, of danger. Well-dressed duelists and Bravosi swordmasters met there, and occasionally a fight turned deadly. Arthur had no illusions about Braavos. Even a city of masks and coin had its brutal edges. But whatever green sight or gift had stirred in him beneath the pale blade of dawn, it had begun to change him in ways he was only starting to understand. Many courtesans in Braavos are celebrated in song, and a few are set in bronze or marble. But the title Black Pearl is passed down like an heirloom and rarely fades. It has endured for 4 generations and become the most storied courtesan name in the 7 kingdoms. The first Black Pearl was a captain and pirate queen, Belaris Utheris, one of King Aegon IV Targaryen's 9 mistresses. The second was Belaris's bastard daughter by Aegon, Baelanara, sung in her day as the most beautiful woman in the world. Her daughters and granddaughters took up the mantle as courtesans as well, and each who bore the title carried a little of dragon's blood in her veins. The current Black Pearl also bears the name Belaris Utheris and is one of Braavos' most famous courtesans. "How is the schedule arranged for today?" she asked. Belaris sat before a large glass mirror with her eyes closed, as was her habit, while servants and maidens worked at her hair and makeup. Her gown was dark yellow silk, cut low, the color a striking complement to her bright brown skin. "Miss, this morning we go to the Moon Pool," one maiden said, fastening a gold net into her black hair. "2 assassins will fight to the death for your kiss. There are also a few singers hoping to win your favor." Belaris opened her violet eyes like gems. Her voice was soft. "And after that?" "At noon, lunch with the Pentoshi governor at the Sea King's palace," the maiden answered, setting a necklace at her throat. "In the afternoon, you accompany the keyholder to the play Wrath of the Dragon King at the Great Gate Theater. The keyholder is Wilfer of House Osiris." "Wrath of the Dragon King?" Belaris rose from her chair and let the maids fuss as she turned before the mirror. Chains of black jade and gold beads swung above her breasts. "Is it about the 7 kingdoms?" "No, miss. They say it's about Prince Garin, the great king of the Shrouded Lord," the maiden said, bending to lace her stocking. "You do enjoy stories of the 7 kingdoms." 300 dragons burning the Rhoyne," Belaris murmured, turning the phrase over as she smoothed the silk. "A sad tale. Still, I have ties to the 7 kingdoms. That little line of blood, it is true dragon's blood." The maiden began to list the evening engagements. "And tonight, cancel tonight's plans," and Belaris interrupted with a laugh. "Prepare the pleasure boat. We leave now. A true dragon does not like to wait." "Yes, miss." The pleasure boat threaded the canals toward the Sea King's palace. On either bank rose the lofty towers of keyholders and noble houses and the House of the Red Hand, a great asylum and hospital. Between those buildings clustered shops, brothels, inns, winehouses, guild halls, and money changers. Statues of past sea kings, lawmakers, sailors, and warriors stood along the bridges and promenades, and so did poets, singers, and courtesans. At the Moon Pool, Arthur sat in the stands, eating his daily peach and waiting for the Bravosi swordsmen to begin. A few singers had already started, and he noticed more people than usual. The terraces were nearly full. More spectators still funneled through the outer walkway. "I heard the Black Pearl is coming this morning," a dark-skinned Summer Islander beside him said, eager. 2 famous assassins will fight to the death for 1 kiss." "Is that so?" Arthur shrugged and bit into the peach. "Then there will only be 1 famous assassin left afterward." He'd seen this sort of thing before, duels staged for fame. In Bravos, fame brought opportunities, and Arthur had his own plans. He watched these fights not only for the swordplay, but to scout fighters for the blacksmith shop he meant to open. He would find skilled, lesser-known swordsmen and assassins, forge them good blades, and either hire them or sign pacts to have them name his shop when they won their renown. A week of watching had already given him a short list of prospects. "Look, here she comes," the Summer Islander said, tugging his sleeve. "Should call her the Brown Pearl, if you ask me." The Black Pearl's arrival changed the tenor of the pool. Her walk, the sway of her skirt, the effortless command of a room, they were all as songs and stories promised. Her skin was a warm brown, as the Islander had joked, and the singer's notes climbed higher, drowning out chatter. "She looked right at me," the Islander boasted. "The first Black Pearl was a Summer Islander." As she took her place, two famed assassins entered from opposite sides and faced off before the fountain. Just then a tall woman approached Arthur. "Hello." She looked him over and then said in Bravosi, "My mistress invites you to the private box on the high platform. Will you come?" "Who is your mistress?" Arthur asked. The woman leaned close and whispered, "The Black Pearl." Arthur felt a flicker of curiosity and did not refuse. It was the first time a Bravosi courtesan had invited him. He followed her up to the private box. Candlesticks brightened the space. A richly patterned mirror carpet lay on the floor. Belarus lounged in a soft chair, a silver cup in her hand. "Are you from Lys or Volantis?" she asked, studying his clothes. "You do not look like a Bravosi." "I am from Westeros, from the north," Arthur answered. He wore a brown hunting coat, not the city's black silks. "Your violet eyes make me feel closer somehow." Belarus motioned for him to sit and spoke in the common tongue. "Do you have true dragon blood of the Targaryens?" "You must be mistaken," Arthur replied, looking at her violet eyes, the same as his. "My mother was of the Dane family, from Starfall City. I get my eyes from her." "And what brings you to Bravos?" Belarus asked, glancing at the sword at his hip. "Sailor? Swordsman? Knight?" "I am a blacksmith," he said. "I'm opening a smithy near the old clothes market dock." Belarus's brow rose. "What will you call it?" Arthur hadn't thought the name through. His fingers walked over the personal mark on his sword hilt, the snowflake and the peach, and the answer slipped out, half without thinking. Snow and Peach Blacksmith Shop. The name sounded odd in her ear. "Sounds like a theater's name. Is that how you name things in Westeros?" Belarus watched the two assassins beneath them, men fighting both for her favor and for their own fame. "If you ask me, call it Old Clothes Market Dock Blacksmith Shop," she said, amused. Arthur scratched his head and looked at the heavy necklace around her neck and the many pendants that dangled from it. Something in her manner told him she enjoyed being consulted. "I was hasty," he admitted, then laughed. "Thank you, Miss Black Pearl, for naming my shop. I'll make sure everyone who comes in knows the name was chosen by you." Below, the duel reached its end. One assassin drove his blade home into the other's belly. He, too, was cut across the left arm and cheek. The crowd surged with the noise of approval and shock, and candles flickered in the private box as Belarus set her cup down and watched the blood drop into the fountain. Chapter 31. Man. It was clear that taking advantage of a courtesan was not easy. After Black Pearl kissed his injured cheek, the more famous assassin glared at Arthur for some reason and issued a challenge. "I'm not an assassin," Arthur said, pointing at his plain clothes. He stood up and took a step back, trying to put distance between himself and the man above him. "I'm a blacksmith." "You brought a sword." The assassin was thin and a head shorter than Arthur. He pressed the point, defiant. "You're a man." "You're right," Arthur replied, "but give me a reason to fight you." "For honor." Arthur shook his head. "The honor you speak of holds no appeal for me." The assassin's face flushed. Black Pearl drifted forward and took Arthur's hand. She leaned close, her voice soft and seductive in his ear. "Isn't this a good time to make a name for yourself? If you can win, I can grant you a not-too-excessive request." Warm breath, and those words whispered in his ear, made Arthur nod before he fully thought it through. He didn't accept because he couldn't resist a dare or because he was hot-blooded. It was Black Pearl's suggestion that struck him cold. The swordsman he had been searching for, the unknown, powerful duelist, could very well be him. His temperament, the reluctance to solve problems with violence, had kept him from recognizing his own skill. 9 years of ordinary schooling had done him no favors in that regard. They stood by the fountain. The blood from the previous duel still stained the stone, and the faint iron scent lingered in the air. From the stands, the crowd shouted, loud and divided. "Kid, don't fight him. He'll kill you," called a voice from Summer Island. "This has no honor. Hurry up and start. Let the foreigner taste a Bravosi rapier." Voices rippled across the moon pool. The short, slender challenger gave a ferocious smile, drew his blade, and revealed a thin, long Bravosi rapier. "Don't blame me, blacksmith," he said. "Blame yourself for not knowing who you are." Arthur didn't answer. He drew his yin-yang twin swords. Under the moon pool's reflected light, the paired blades, one narrow, one broad, showed complex black patterns that made them look almost otherworldly. The noise in the stands dropped as people murmured in surprise. One scabbard, two swords, and two different styles. "How are those black patterns made? I've never seen anything like it." The thin assassin closed distance without letting the crowd's chatter distract him. His thrusts were exactly what Bravosi rapier technique promised: fast, accurate, merciless. He feinted and thrust 3 times in quick succession, aiming at Arthur's throat, heart, and stomach. They were faster than any of Arthur's previous opponents, but still too slow. With dual-wielding assault doubling his attack speed and sword vision newly awakened, the thin man's blade seemed to crawl through honey. Arthur stepped back on his right foot, pivoted, and with a flick of his left wrist, the slender blade in his hand met the rapier in a clean, practiced rhythm. Clang, clang, clang. In an instant, the stands heard 3 bright, ringing clashes. Assassin duels rarely lasted long. When the crowd's senses returned, they saw the broad blade of Arthur's other sword resting at the thin assassin's throat. Scarlet welled from a neat cut. The blood sliding over the dark patterns of the blade was oddly beautiful. "You lost." Arthur's voice was measured over the gasps. "Be glad my swordsmanship has improved. Otherwise, I couldn't have spared you." "I lost." The assassin's hand dropped, and his rapier clattered to the stone. His expressions crumpled. His techniques had been read completely. "You should have killed me just now. You're useful to me alive." Arthur resheathed the thin blade, keeping the broad sword in both hands. "Pick up your sword and hold it flat if you want to live." Instinct made the assassin obey. "Hold the sword with both hands," Arthur ordered. "Steady." The assassin gripped the rapier with both hands and stammered, "Are you going to?" He didn't finish. Arthur activated Kill. A sudden, overwhelming power surged through him. He channeled it into his arms, stepped forward, and swung the broad blade with both hands against the rapier. With a single ringing clang, the slender sword snapped cleanly in two. No splinters, no jagged metal, just a perfect break. Silence fell. The assassin stared first at the 2 halves of his blade in his hand, then at Arthur's broad sword, its black patterns unmarred. He swallowed hard. What had he said earlier, about Arthur not knowing who he was? He must have been out of his mind. He had underestimated the man standing before him. Arthur lifted his voice for the crowd. "Please come find my smithy, Snow and Peach, opening soon at the Old Clothes Market dock." Snow and Peach! The stands erupted. After seeing the sword just now, people understood the quality instantly. "This name was given to me by Lady Black Pearl," Arthur added, smiling and waving. "Please thank her for me. I like the drama of it." Snow and Peach. The cheering swelled. Some of the more musical spectators even began improvising chants. At the right moment, Black Pearl, Belarus, stepped out of the high platform's compartment, a perfectly timed smile and a couple of graceful nods for Arthur. When the cheers died down, Arthur drew the broken rapier from the ground and held it up as a prop. "I will forge swords like this for exceptional assassins and swordsmen who test themselves against me. Win or lose, if your swordsmanship is good enough, I will personally craft your blade. Of course, if you lose, you pay me for it. If you win, I won't take a single coin." He struck while the mood was hot. "This black-patterned slender sword is called the Black Mamba. The Black Mamba is a snake from my hometown. It isn't actually black. Its colors are vivid, but open its mouth and the inside is all black. When you see black, beware. One bite can fell a mammoth." Arthur grinned and, with a blacksmith's flourish, put the line like a ballad to his audience. Those who can forge a Black Mamba sword are the undisputed best smiths in my town. Black Mamba, the tale and its theatrics sent the crowd into another roar. How much would a blade like that cost? The Summer Islander shouted from the stands. Arthur, riding the moment, realized he hadn't asked his opponent's name. What's your name again? Angra Wolf, the assassin said quietly. Let my opponent, the famous Bravosi assassin, Mr. Angra Wolf, tell everyone the value of this sword, Arthur proclaimed, inflating the honor of the moment. He has a more intuitive feel for a blade, and he's an excellent assassin, I acknowledge. He'll be Snow and Peach's first customer. I give him that honor. Angra Wolf swallowed. The wound on his neck stung when he did. Arthur leaned in, voice low so only Angra could hear. Think carefully before you speak. Angra wiped sweat from his brow, stared at Arthur and the blades glittering in the light, and then, voice trembling with a mix of pride and humiliation, declared to the crowd, I am willing to pay the equivalent weight of gold for a Black Mamba sword. Fate liked to play tricks. Often, the thing you fear most arrives exactly as you expect. Looking at the island and the reefs that still haunted him, Victor felt the events of months ago as fresh as if they'd just happened. If he hadn't been lucky enough to carry Lord Arthur, then he might now be a laborer or stevedore on Sweet Sister, or already crab bait. Following the storm, Victor ordered his ship, the Wavebreaker, to make fast alongside the pier of salvaged timber. The planks creaked under the feet of the Bravosi men, and he couldn't help but wonder if one of them had once been part of the Wavebreaker itself. Bring out the box of prepared silk, he told his first mate, an older man whose son and nephew were being held on Sweet Sister. Captain, will they really be released? The first mate asked from the deck, watching the pier where a tense crowd of islanders had gathered. And without ransom? Lord Arthur said Count Godric is a practical man, Victor replied, though unease made him slide a hand to the silver-inlaid dagger at his waist. The hilt bore a direwolf pattern, Arthur's token, and he treated it like a charm. I hope Lord Arthur is right. The first mate sighed and ordered the sailors to bring the boxes. The Bravosi aboard the Wavebreaker paced anxiously, while the men on the pier burst into cheers. As soon as the ship touched wood, they were ashore, eager to brag to friends about Bravos, throwing in the occasional local curse for color. Zon Bonell barked at them to get back to work and told the first mate to start unloading. Before long, the captain of the guard from Sweet Sister arrived with a few men. His eyes widened when he saw Victor step ashore. I did not expect to see you here again, Bravosi captain, the captain of the guard said. You are the second Bravosi captain I've seen come ashore on Sweet Sister from a ship. Perhaps you will see me a third or a fourth time, Victor said, and stepping onto familiar ground steadied him. He gave a polite smile under the captain's astonished gaze. I'd like to see Count Godric. I brought a box of silk from the east as a gift. The Count has set out bread and salt for you in the castle, the captain of the guard said, measuring Victor with a look. Come with me. He greeted Zahn as he spoke, saying the Count was eager to see him. Victor, Zahn, and a few sailors carrying the silk followed Cato, the captain of the guard, toward the castle. The other Bravosi either headed for familiar winehouses in Sisterton or returned to whatever homes they had left. As they walked through Sisterton, Victor lingered. The little town was as filthy as he remembered, reek of pig dung and rotten fish, and the gallows were hung with corpses whose bellies had been picked clean by crows, the bones stark and white. Your boys are not inside, Cato said when he saw Victor stop. Nor are they up there on the gallows. Victor touched the dagger again and felt a little steadier. This place brings back bad memories, he said. Only Bravosi and smugglers have any fond memories here. Cato replied without turning his head. Don't frighten him like that, Cato, Zahn teased, tugging his silk cloak out of the mud. He's going to be our partner. You should see Bravos, truly eye-opening. They crossed a black basalt bridge and pushed open a rusted iron portcullis. Green seawater foamed in the river below, battering the castle's foundation stones, and seaweed clung to the gatehouse. They moved through a muddy courtyard and climbed the deep stone keep Arthur had once walked. In the shadowed hall, Count Godric waited. After the formal greetings, Victor set the box of silk on the table and spoke plainly. Count Godric, I have come as agreed. I want my hostages, my crew and my sons returned. I understand your eagerness, Godric said and gestured to Zahn. I haven't seen my nephew in a long time either. Zahn pulled papers wrapped in oilcloth from his cloak. These are the reports Arthur collected and had sent to Braavos, he said. Should I fetch the maester? Cato asked. Godric waved him off. No need. I can still read, and this must stay between us. I don't trust the maester to keep secrets. Zahn told what he had seen in Braavos, the great titan at the harbor, the purple fleet, the city's wealth. Godric held a reading lens to the documents and squinted as he reviewed Arthur's notes. It's much as the maester said, he murmured, then looked up at his nephew. How did Arthur come by this information? It was through business, Zahn said. An insurance merchant in Braavos, and with the help of that captain, he nodded at Victa. Arthur arranged cooperation and profit shares between Sable Caffey, myself, and Captain Victa. The intelligence is solid. He watched his uncle for any sign of what motive Arthur might have had. Godric rubbed his balding head. He knew there had to be more than goodwill behind Arthur's actions. What did he gain from it? He asked. What did Arthur stand to win? Victa, impatient, reminded him again. Can the hostages be released now? Godric regarded the Braavosi captain for a long moment, then stood. The Braavosi men are working in the shipyard below the castle. As we agreed, they are yours. He turned to Cato. Take him to the shipyard. From now on, we are partners. There's a gift from me waiting there as well. I hope you'll like it. Victa bowed quickly, relieved, and reached into his breast for a letter. I was too nervous when I arrived and nearly forgot, he said, handing it over. This is a letter written for you by Lord Arthur. Chapter 33. The Purple-Eyed Fox Who Has Been Clever Since Childhood. After Victa left, Count Goderich opened the letter and read it. It was addressed to the future guardian of the Bite, Count Goderich. The first sentence stunned him as he held the spyglass. The stretch of sea Arthur described was not small at all. The Bite could cover the whole Three Sisters, reach south to the Twins and Pebble Isle of the Fingers, and north to the mouth of the Broken Stream in the north. Goderich steadied himself, held the lens, and read on. Believe that when you read this letter, you have already kept your promise and released the Braavosi hostages. My lord, forgive my prying. After all, the folk of the Three Sisters are not the most reliable in the tales of the old wet nurse. Even when you said there were no sisters in the sister stew, in a way that was a lie. But to the point, the guardianship of the Bite is not mine to give. That is the king's right. I once promised to help you reduce the risks of salvaging wrecks, but you cannot walk by the river often without getting your shoes wet, so I want to find you a ship. The king of the Seven Kingdoms ships are certainly large enough. Robert Baratheon is, as you said, brave and bold and fights like a king. At the same time, I hear he is prodigal. When it comes to spending, he fights like a king as well. My friend in Braavos told me the king owes the Iron Bank of Braavos a large sum. You have surely heard the saying, the Iron Bank never forgives a debt. That saying will trouble the king and his hand. Perhaps, my lord, at the proper time, you might regularly offer goods from a few wrecks to ease their burden and gain a berth on the ship. Be careful. Timing is everything when boarding a ship. Miss your chance, and you may find yourself at the gallows. Stannis Baratheon, master of ships, is a man wedded to law and order. You will know him better than I do. I suggest you not only salvage wrecks, but also engage in legitimate shipping, one open, one secret, so they can cover for one another. Your nephew Zahn has talent for this sort of thing. I can teach him the right moments to board a ship. Your most sincere friend, Arthur Snow. Uncle, what does it say? Zahn asked, spooning more of the sisters' stew the maid had brought. The crab tasted of home, the only two comforts he had here. He doesn't read like a northerner, not like a Stark, the old count said, setting down the spyglass. His pale eyes betrayed no pleasure or sorrow. There's a house in the Reach called Florent. What's their sigil? A fox. Zahn recalled the house, the tip of its ears like the webs on their hands. A golden red fox. Arthur Snow is like a cunning purple-eyed fox. Goderich picked up his spoon and attacked the stew. Bastards in the Reach should be called flowers. If he were in the Reach, he'd be a Florent, Zahn corrected. Speaking of flowers, the courtesans of Braavos are quite famous. Zahn, from now on you will learn from those courtesans in Braavos. Goderich waved his spoon and ordered, "I need you to send messages to the sisters and learn how to board a ship." "Board a ship?" "Yes, uncle." Zahn didn't fully understand his uncle. Maybe he was getting senile, but he was eager. Bravos sounded like a place to live. At the shipyard below the castle, Victa finally met his three long-separated sons, Vikui, Vikil, and Vikshan. All four could not hide their tears as they hugged and wept, their joy and relief plain after so much hardship. "Father, look, we repaired the breaker," the eldest, Vikui, said, wiping his eyes and pointing to a familiar purple-hulled boat not far off. When the tide went out and the folks from the sisters salvaged the wreck, they saw the keel wasn't badly damaged, so the Count let us start work. "May I go aboard?" Victa looked longingly at the ship and asked the captain of the guards beside him, "Just for a little while." "This was a gift to you from the Count," the captain shrugged. "You may take the ship when you leave the island." Victa thanked the captain and stepped onto the boat. Memories flashed past his eyes as he came to the familiar wheel. He touched a faint fist print in the wood, his mark from when he'd steered the ship into the reef. He stayed on the island 3 more days, thanked Count Goderich, and ate the sister stew the Count so recommended. At noon on the 3rd day, his vessel, the Broken Reef, and Zahn's ship Storm set out for White Harbor on the current. White Harbor, fishing pier. Fat Tom was counting the inventory of planks and peach wine stored in the warehouse, House Manderley provided. Lord Eddard Stark had arranged for him to be posted in White Harbor to be in charge of escorting cargo from the peach orchards to the town, as well as warehousing, placement, accounting, and selling of the planks and peach wine once they arrived. Escorting the goods was easy. The stream from the peach orchards runs through the 7 cities and into the White Knife, so small boats and rafts can float them straight down to White Harbor. For escort duty, he had assigned Winebelly. The warehousing and the bookkeeping, though, were another matter. Fat Tom had been learning to read and write since he had been put to help manage the peach gardens, but he was an old man with little energy and never mastered it. Now he couldn't manage the records himself and didn't trust anyone else with them. He looked helplessly at the scribbles on the ledger. "Are these warehouses enough?" Wilfild Manderley, clad in a practical hunting outfit, stepped into the building and asked softly, "Do you need more space?" "Enough, miss. Thank Wyman Manderley for his generosity." Fat Tom wiped his brow. "This is the last batch for now. We are waiting on what Arthur mentioned in his letter, the Bravosi captain coming to dock." "Are you recording the goods?" Wilfild glanced at Fat Tom's scrawl and frowned. "Can't you read and write?" "I can't." Fat Tom scratched his head, embarrassed. "And I don't trust others to do it either. You could hand it to me for verification." Wilfild touched the small silver 7-pointed star at her throat. "House Manderley's customs officials will count and record it, and I'll check it myself. If you don't trust me, I won't force it." "How could I? Miss, I'd only be troubling you." Fat Tom hurried to reassure her. "Your station is far above me. As my grandfather said, what House Manderley owes House Stark cannot be repaid." Wilfild smiled. "It's not trouble. It's an honor to serve Lord Eddard Stark." Fat Tom was about to fumble for an answer when a White Harbor guard burst in. "Miss, 3 ships just arrived at the pier, and their captain sent me this." He bowed and presented a silver inlaid dagger with a direwolf engraved on the pommel. "He says he's under the command of Arthur Snow of Winterfell. Robb did give Arthur a dagger before he left." Fat Tom took the dagger, inspected it carefully, then said to Wilfild, "This is his." "Where's the captain? Why didn't you bring him?" Wilfild asked. "One of the ships is from the 3 sisters," the guard said. "By our rules, we must search them when they dock. They often come with smuggled goods or worse." "Arthur did say in his letter he had been a guest on the sisters," Fat Tom added, holding the dagger. "Seems he got on with them well." Wilfild's thoughts turned as she gave an order. "Let the purple-sailed boat come to dock. Confirm whether their captain is called Victa and whether he's Bravosi." The guard ran off. "Do you know him?" Fat Tom asked. "Arthur and I are friends," Wilfild replied. "His letters usually arrive at White Harbor first, then the town meister sends them to Winterfell. Arthur really has friends everywhere." Fat Tom sighed with a fondness for the past. He always loved mixing with all sorts. Wilfild took the dagger from Fat Tom and examined it a moment before she asked, "What kind of person is he to your eye?" "Arthur?" Fat Tom blinked. "I can't read or write, so I might not be the best judge. But that boy, Arthur, was clever from the start." He cleared his throat and, warmed by affection, began to praise him. "He's tall and handsome, kind-hearted, steady, filial to his parents, good to the old, no bad habits, and he loves small animals, very gentle." "Miss Wilfild," Fat Tom blurted, "may I ask how old you are?" "I'm 10 years old. I know what I'm doing." Wilfild's voice came from the doorway. In the halls of the new castle, her sister Vera was threatening the guard posted outside Wilfild's room. "Let me in, or I'll tell grandfather you hit me," she demanded. "I will tell Miss Wilfild truthfully about you entering," the guard replied helplessly. "It's my duty, even if I am punished." Vera stuck out her tongue and slipped into her sister's chamber. She had done so many times before, but still hunched her shoulders. Wilfild always made her do embroidery when she intruded, and Vera was no good at sewing. This time she was after a letter, one Arthur had sent to Wilfild. Her sister refused to show it or tell her the contents, which rankled like a cat's scratch. Vera rummaged through the dressing table until she found the letter in a separate drawer. Holding it felt like thieving a fish. She grinned as she read. But as she finished, she cried out that she'd been fooled. The letter, written to Miss Wilfild Manderley, read, "I write from Bravos. The Bravosi Captain Victa, who first brought me to King's Landing, has by chance become my subordinate. On the way to Bravos, I learned he has 30 years of sailing experience in the narrow sea and has never made a serious mistake. He is diligent and conscientious, with no history of smuggling. I think him trustworthy. Victa will travel between Bravos and White Harbor, selling peach wine and planks from Winterfell. If you are interested, you may join. I think letting a ship sit idle in port is wasteful. It will rot away like a piece of driftwood. When I was in White Harbor with you, I saw many rotten planks flying the mermaid flag. Snow." Chapter 34, Blacksmith. Since the Moonpool competition, the famous sword Black Mamba, said to split a rapier with a single strike, and the tales of Arthur and the notorious assassin Angra Wolf, with Black Pearl Belleris at the center, had been turned into catchy ballads by singers and bards across Bravos. Some praised the blade's edge and temper, the intricate patterns on its surface. Some poets, inspired by Arthur's story about the Black Mamba, penned lines that the sword either never left its sheath or, when it did, it bled. Others lauded Arthur's forging and swordsmanship, saying such a weapon wasn't something money could simply buy. One had to fight Arthur and earn his approval. Still more celebrated Black Pearl herself, claiming she had kissed the Black Mamba in Arthur's hand. That was why it could slice through Angra Wolf's rapier. The unbuilt Snow and Peach smithy, named by Belleris, was already being praised to the skies. Arthur had meant to ride Black Pearl's fame, not the other way around. Bravosi society was relentless. He had been pleasantly surprised to find the attention reciprocated. The exposure did wonders. Without Black Pearl, neither he nor his shop would have become known so quickly or so widely. Arthur had always positioned his swords at the high end of the market, fine materials, striking appearance, and stories to create emotional value. He used scarcity, leveraged hot topics, generated hype, and set thresholds, deploying every marketing trick he remembered from his previous life. The plan worked. Swordsmen and assassins came in steady streams. Arthur didn't spar for free. Every challenger paid a fee in items worth gold dragons. After all, his main goal was to sell swords. Filtering out the penniless kept him focused. He also wanted to recruit a few talented fighters, though he hadn't acted on that plan yet. "You're too hasty when you strike. Your footwork is stiff, leaving you full of openings. I knocked your sword away with that counter because of that," Arthur told his fourth opponent of the day after dispatching him easily. He gave the standard pointers. The man had paid a decent quality agate for the lesson. "Work on your footwork and mindset," Arthur said. "Your swordsmanship isn't ready for a Black Mamba." "Thank you, Master Blacksmith." The young swordsman rubbed his sore hand, picked up his rapier, and bowed. "I'll practice. One day you'll forge a Black Mamba for me." A little over a month had passed since the Moonpool contest. Bravos now called Arthur the blacksmith master, not merely a tradesman, but a teacher who could identify faults and sharpen skills. Challengers compared themselves to rough blades. Arthur was the smith who would temper them. Earning a black mamba meant they had become complete. Arthur swallowed a bite of a peach to recover between matches. Fighting these competent swordsmen with blunt blades took energy. Pete, the account keeper, flipped through the challenger register. "There's one left," Pete said. "Calls himself Dwarf Weiss. He's been loitering at the door almost every day this month, but he doesn't have a proper payment." "Send him in," Arthur said. The Sisterman guards led in a short Bravosi man. He had brown hair, a face freckled like a boy's, youthful, unremarkable. A wooden sword, weighted with lead, hung at his waist. "You don't have a real sword?" Arthur asked. "Swordsman or assassin?" "My master taught me with wood," Wise answered, scratching his head. "I only have this. He says I'm not yet a proper water dancer." Arthur perked up. In Bravos, the legends of true water dancers, fighters who could move across water without ripples, were almost religious. "Who's your master?" he asked, and motioned to the weapon rack. "Pick one from there if you must." "He won't let me say his name." Weiss glanced at the blunt iron practice swords and shook his head. "Master says I can only use an iron blade when he allows it. I'm not a true water dancer. I might hurt someone if I can't control myself." "Then why are you here?" Arthur frowned. He couldn't imagine Weiss wanted to fight him with a wooden sword. "My master told me to earn a real sword. This is his final test." Weiss drew his weighted trainer. "I heard if I beat you, you'll forge me a real blade for free. Is that true?" "If you beat me, I'll forge one." Arthur looked the boy over, slow, simple, almost naive. "You really want to fight me with wood? I could split that with one strike. You won't hit me." Weiss shifted sideways, held the trainer flat, and took a stance. "Ready?" Arthur called for 2 practice woods and got one to feel its balance. When he signaled the start, the dullness on Weiss's face vanished. He became all care and focus. His steps were light and even, not fast but precise, and his small body swayed rhythmically like a dance, so regular that it hid the intent of his moves. Speed's not everything. His footwork is excellent, Arthur thought, and matched him, probing with staggered swings. Wise's thin frame gave him a natural advantage in evasions. He stepped with the rhythm of his own footwork, eyes fixed, searching for openings, knees, head, torso. Weiss did not attack for a dozen passes. He only parried when he couldn't avoid a blow, and at times he hid the blade he'd been holding flat behind his back. Then, in the middle of the spar, his lips moved for the first time. "Be careful." The words were soft, and his speed suddenly spiked. With 2 rapid, twisting steps, he slipped past Arthur's guard and lunged, the hidden trainer whipping out toward Arthur's waist like a scorpion's sting. It was a fast, fierce thrust, but Arthur was faster. He twisted away like a shadow, the wooden blade missing by inches. Wise's face registered surprise. No one, not even his master, had had their prepared strike merely miss before. Arthur sounded the contact of wood on his shoulder with a light tap and stepped back. "You lost," he breathed out, wiping cold sweat from his brow. Weiss had forced him to make a hairline dodge, an emergency maneuver Arthur only used when cornered. Had Weiss not warned him, Arthur might not have reacted in time. "I lost." Weiss nodded, sliding the trainer back onto his belt and returning to that dull, unassuming expression. He bowed and turned to leave. "Your swordsmanship is worthy of a black mamba," Arthur called after him. "But I have no money," Weiss answered, halfway out the door. "I lost to you. I don't want your money. I want to meet your master." Arthur handed the practice sword to a sisterman. "I want to learn about water dancing." "I can't speak for my master," Weiss said. "Just tell him what happened today. Tell him I want to ask for his instruction in person." Weiss thought a moment, then nodded simply. "Okay, I'll tell him. I come here every day. It's his requirement." After Weiss left, Arthur stepped into the front yard. The blacksmith shop, newly renovated and bearing the sign Snow and Peach, had been operating for 2 weeks. Bare-chested figures moved through the heat, ebony-skinned summer islanders, fair Carthians, Westerosi, and a majority of Bravosi. Apprentices tossed mixtures of charcoal and crushed ore into the bloomery furnaces through their top openings to make bloom iron for forging and casting. Smoke rose steadily from several clay and stone bloomery kilns built into the simple walls by Bravosi craftsmen. Other apprentices worked the bellows, sturdy animal skin constructions, pumping a constant rush of air into the fires. Ding, ding, dang, ding, dang, ding. The rhythm of hammers rang out from the anvils, heat rolling off the metal like waves. The fame of the Black Mamba had drawn not only swordsmen and assassins, but many smiths and apprentices eager to learn the secrets of its making. Arthur had originally accepted any skilled smith, but as crowds grew, along with impostors, he raised the bar. Now those working in the shop either proved their skill or paid a hefty apprenticeship fee. Arthur signed employment contracts based on ability and conducted assessments. Items forged by apprentices carried only the snowflake mark. Most apprentices assisted journeyman smiths. Journeyman-made swords and armor could add a personal mark, but had to bear the peach-shaped stamp as well. Only those who could forge the Black Mamba could add their own mark to that blade, and the snow and peach mark belonged to Arthur alone. Arthur, bare-chested and carrying a forging hammer, walked into the shop. At his arrival, the smiths stopped mid-strike, their faces lit with anticipation. Arthur announced, "Today I'll forge a different kind of Black Mamba. Watch carefully. Prepare the stacked billets and clear furnace number 1, a dark-skinned summer islander ordered the apprentices beside him and the others in the yard. Don't interfere with the master's forging. If you have questions, wait until he's done." His name was Carl Bai. Bai had come because of Arthur's reputation and had been hired to manage daily operations. Carl himself had once run a smithy in the Summer Isles and was the closest in skill in the shop to forging a Black Mamba. Arthur had met him once at the Moon Pool, where Carl had eagerly introduced Arthur to the courtesan Black Pearl. The apprentices obeyed at once. This was a rare chance to observe Arthur's work. A few days before, Arthur had completed Black Mamba orders for the famed assassin Angra Wolf and 2 other notable swordsmen, so his technique was well practiced. Since awakening sword vision, Arthur had acquired more than sword moves, an intuitive sense of heat control while forging, a knack for detecting impurities or hairline flaws in a blade. That intuition had elevated his smithing into a different league. If his earlier swords had been excellent, these were now unmistakably master level. Arthur did not use the wild methods he'd employed in Winterfell, naked body and assault, because those could not be taught. He needed to train capable smiths. From stacking the billets to controlling the blank's temperature, he explained each key point as he worked. He forged the billet until it stretched into a rectangular blank, then explained that when twisting the steel, one must chamfer the 4 corners, or the piece might crack during the twist. Finally, when it came time to quench, he had the apprentices ready the mud he had mixed beforehand. "What do you need the mud for, master?" Carl asked, puzzled. The others looked on with the same curiosity. Arthur had never used this trick when forging the Black Mamba before. "Clay tempering," Arthur said as he smeared the mud over the blade and spine. "It covers the parts that don't need extreme hardness. Then we heat the sword to a specific temperature." He slid the mud-coated blade into the furnace and controlled the bellows himself. When the glow reached the right tone, he pulled the blade out and plunged it into the quench bucket. As he did, he infused the King's Sword attribute into the sword. A water and oil mixture hissed and flared against the red-hot steel, flames leaping and forcing everyone back a step. When the blade had cooled, Arthur brushed the dried mud away with an iron wire brush and explained, "When the exposed parts of a red-hot blade enter the quench, they cool rapidly. The portions covered with the clay change temperature much less. That difference in cooling produces different hardness across the blade, rigid edge and tougher spine. You get hardness without sacrificing overall toughness. Bravosi swordsmen use rapiers, good for thrusting, not chopping." Carl's expression shifted to admiration. "If your clay tempering works as you say, it will take practicality to another level." Everyone crowded closer to see the unfinished blade. After grinding, acid etching, and final adjustments, the sword took shape. The clay had darkened the metal. The blade and spine showed an ancient brown, and the twisted pattern was only visible where spine met edge. This Qinggang sword didn't have the bright, flowing sheen of the one Arthur had forged for Jon, but it carried a primitive, severe look. Carl frowned at its plain appearance, but with curiosity rather than contempt. "Shall we test it?" Carl asked. "Test it," Arthur replied, wrapping the tang with a temporary handle of rope. "Bring out another finished sword." one with the peach mark. The Yard gasped. Tales of Arthur cutting a sword with a black mamba at the moon pool had become ballads. Were they about to witness it now? Apprentices brought a leather-armored test dummy, an iron-bound wooden shield, and a Bravosi rapier stamped with the peach mark. First came the chopping test. The black mamba's blade shape was more rapier-like and not designed for chopping. When Arthur struck the leather-armored dummy, the leather shredded as if it were butter, offering no protection. The ancient brown blade sank deeper into the scarred wooden dummy than any previous black mamba Arthur had forged, nearly twice as deep as before. This is truly incredible, Carl breathed, examining the cuts and the torn leather. Arthur only shrugged. He had expected this result. Next, the thrust test. Arthur pressed the tip into the iron-bound shield 3 times. Each poke left notches like nails driven into a table, nearly piercing the shield. The onlookers couldn't help but exclaim. They had expected only slight marks, but now saw near penetrations. The black mamba in Arthur's hand seemed to live up to its fearsome reputation. Carl, relieved and impressed, compared the new brown blade to the ornate patterned black mambas of the past and nodded. The plainness did not reflect weakness. Under everyone's watchful gaze, Arthur swung the new black mamba 3 times in succession and severed the peach-marked sword made by the shop's journeyman, an item whose quality was second only to the black mamba. This time he used no kill technique, no oversized broadsword to force the edge, just the sword itself. By the time Arthur finished the final details on the black mamba, night had fallen. He invited Carl to stay for dinner. The fare was familiar: onion meat stew, dried fruit bread, and amber sweet wine from the summer isles. "Master, your skill is amazing, and you're generous to teach it to us," Carl said after a long swallow of the wine. "Summer Islanders love trade and travel. I once went to Qohor and saw how they smelt Valyrian steel. Their smiths call it magic, but your forging is stronger than that magic, and you're more generous than the Qohor masters." "It's the wisdom of the ancestors," Arthur replied, chewing dried fruit bread and savoring the wine. He grinned, a little tipsy. "But I did add a touch of magic. Have you heard the saying that a true master pours his spirit and will into his work?" He closed his eyes and took his time over the flavors. "I don't know what came over me today. I was in a state of inspiration. I might not be able to forge like this again." Carl listened like a disciple. The wine's light sweetness and the saltiness of the stew loosened his tongue. Arthur thought the wine pleasant enough. No wonder the one-eyed insurance merchant Shabel Caffey drank it daily. "You mentioned a drawing die earlier," Arthur said, bringing Carl back. "It's feasible. We can make one." Carl brightened. He explained the drawing die, a device to make chainmail wire by pulling heated rods through a series of holes, far easier than hammering each link by hand. "Chainmail is light and reduces damage from rapier thrusts," he said, slightly drunk and imitating Arthur's mannerisms. "It would be popular in Bravos. My homeland, the Summer Isles, has few minerals. People don't wear much armor. Otherwise, I never would have come here. For that reason, meeting you in Bravos is a blessing." They talked long into the night. Chainmail production, shop management, profit sharing. Arthur agreed to give Carl 20% of the blacksmith shop's profits. Arthur's personal swords remained his own, apart from the snow and peach business. Carl recounted armors, protective gear, and weapons he'd seen on his travels, and described a woven armor made of branches and vines and the smelting methods of Valyrian steel. He explained both in detail, even gesturing wildly when excited, and thinking through feasibility and solutions when Arthur raised doubts. When the Titan roared at dawn, signaling morning, they realized they had spoken all night. Arthur returned to the house, yawning and ready for bed, when he noticed 2 new equipment cards unlocked in the 3 Kingdoms kill system panel. Vine armor greatly resists physical damage. Flame damage received is doubled. Wu 6 swords can devour up to 6 other swords, imitating the form and effects of the devoured blades. Requires special materials to craft. Arthur, half asleep moments before, suddenly felt wide awake. Vine armor at first glance looked odd, strong against physical blows but vulnerable to fire, but it had obvious utility on or near water. An ordinary man in iron armor who fell into the sea would drown. Vine armor, woven from buoyant material, could float. That made it invaluable for river or coastal fights. The Wu Swords card excited him even more. If it could devour other swords and copy their attributes, then he could combine the effects of Qinggong Sword, Cold Ice Sword, and Yin Yang Twin Swords into a single weapon. Who would choose just one when you could have them all? Until the third afternoon, when the Titan roared to mark Braavos' turning of the day, the dwarf known as Weiss had still not come to the smithy. Arthur had resigned himself to missing the dull swordsman and his water dance master. Then someone knocked at his door. A guard ushered in a man in the standard Braavosi garb. Not tall, with curly hair, sharp features, and bright, alert eyes. "You are Arthur Snow?" the man asked, hands clasped behind his back, speaking in crisp Braavosi. "I am Sirio Forel," he added, water dance master to the dwarf Weiss. Arthur raised an eyebrow without surprise. To have forged such a remarkable pupil, the master's skill had to be considerable. Sirio Forel was the Sea King's first sword. Every first sword in Braavos was regarded as the city's finest bladesman. Arthur had already suspected that the name Weiss had mentioned belonged to Sirio's apprentice. "It's an honor," Arthur said, standing and walking to the rack where the finished black mamba sword rested. "Where is Weiss? The real sword I promised him is ready." "You knew of me? You knew you were tied to Weiss beforehand?" Sirio's brow drew together. There was a guarded quality to his voice. "I have never met you. Why are you here?" "In Braavos, you learn the names of the best swordsmen, whether you want to or not." Arthur smiled, lifting the rapier and letting the blade catch the afternoon light. For a boy with an unremarkable manner to wield such skill, his master wasn't hard to guess. Sirio's eyes narrowed. Arthur couldn't tell him that he had used a trick to evade Weiss's assault. He only shrugged. "I am not interested in titles. I want to learn the water dance." Arthur drew the sword from its sheath. The ancient blade flashed in the light with a peculiar brilliance. "I will forge you a black mamba sword like this if you teach me." Sirio's gaze sharpened as he took the sword in both hands and examined it. The rapier seemed to conceal a keen edge in every line. "May I look at it closely?" "Of course. I promised it to Weiss," Arthur said, sheathing it and handing both blade and scabbard over. "He didn't tell me where he lives. You can deliver it to him." Sirio handled the sword with the reverence of a craftsman. "A fine weapon. I'd heard the rumors. This could cut another sword in one blow." He looked up. "Weiss said you dodged his charge. How did you manage that?" "Perhaps by luck." Arthur shrugged. He couldn't tell Sirio about the dodge he'd used, only grinned slightly. "Some things are better left unanswered. Tell me, would a sword like this be worth teaching me the water dance?" "There is a difference in quality between swords." Sirio's eyes flashed with the hunger every fighter feels at the sight of a true blade. "If you beat me, will you really give a black mamba for free?" Arthur felt a small smile lift his lips. "Not every blade reaches this state. I had good metal and a steady hand when I forged this one. It takes a rare combination to make a sword like this." What Arthur valued more than the water dance itself was Sirio's rank and the doors it might open. The first sword's fame, his access to the Sea King's circle. "If you accept my request, I will forge the sword you wish with all my skill," he said. Sirio eyed him carefully. "Only the water dance. How long will you need? I can only come when the Titan roars." "I learn quickly, no longer than 6 months," Arthur replied. "I'll wait for you in the yard." Sirio did not take the black mamba with him. Instead, he said Weiss would soon come live at the mansion as Arthur's guard to repay the gift later. And true to his word, whenever the Titan roared over the next few weeks, Sirio came on schedule to teach. Arthur received a systematic education in the water dance, light, deceptive footwork, slashing and feinting rhythm. His blade and steps improved in ways few lessons could accomplish. Between lessons, Arthur and Sirio grew acquainted with Weiss. The dwarf was inseparable from the ancient black mamba rapier, wiping it with oiled cloth every morning and evening, as if the blade were a living thing. Arthur did not treat him merely as a guard. He set tasks to broaden him, polishing the house's gleaming juying, learning to ride, and studying the Westerosi tongue. Weiss was slow in manner and in speech, but earnest and painstaking in his learning. His focus often let him master things faster than one would expect. Once Arthur asked Weiss what he wanted in life, but the dwarf only scratched his head and blushed, offering no answer. It wasn't until after a practice session, when Arthur invited Sirio to share a meal and wine, that the question came up. After a few cups of plum wine, Sirio answered without hesitation. "He wants to be the Sea King's first sword," Sirio said, "but with his temperament, he cannot." Arthur looked startled. "Isn't the first sword simply the greatest swordsman in Braavos? Wise might not be now, but at his age and with his focus, he could become excellent." Sirio smiled wryly. "I have no doubt he will achieve great things with a blade. He is my chosen apprentice, but becoming first sword takes more than skill. What else is required? Loyalty to the Sea King?" "Loyalty matters," Sirio agreed, then set his cup down and narrowed his eyes. "But insight is more important, the ability to see beneath appearances. Weiss lacks that. He cannot discern the truth of a situation." He told Arthur how he himself had been chosen. "Our captains returned from distant seas with strange beasts for the Sea King's menagerie. Once I stood before the king among many contenders. Some were faster, stronger, taller. One by one they left, though none could say why. The king sat with a fat, yellow cat in his lap. One of his captains had brought it from farther than the land of the morning. The king asked me, 'You have never seen such a creature, have you?' I said, 'I see thousands like it in the alleys of Braavos every night.' The king laughed and appointed me first sword that very day." Arthur considered the tale. A test of insight, expecting a rare beast and seeing who could name the ordinary when others dreamed only of the exotic. Sirio nodded. "Exactly. Those chosen are either stubbornly honest or possess a bright, searching mind. The rest see only what they expect to see. When the king said she, they accepted it. When they described the cat as large or delicate-eared, they read grandeur into ordinary things." Sirio looked at Arthur with something like pity. "Weiss follows orders well. He carries them out without question. His swordsmanship is first-rate. His stealth is fine, but his mind is too obedient. He does not make the connections that reveal true motives or hidden danger. To be first sword, you must not only know how to use a blade, you must see the world around you clearly." Arthur listened and nodded. The lesson was not in moves or parries, but in perception, the province of a true first sword, and precisely the place where Weiss's dull, earnest nature might fail him. Chapter 37. Half-Year Development. Operating businesses, practicing swordsmanship, forging, and experimenting with take something from nothing. More than half a year had flown by, and Arthur's life in Braavos was surprisingly full, every day drained by 100 small tasks. By the count of days, his 11th naming day had long passed. The enterprises Arthur ran in Braavos had survived the initial hardships of pioneering and were steadily moving toward stability. The shipping business was now mainly handled by Victa. The fleet knew the route between White Harbor and Braavos well, and a steady stream of lumber and peach wine from the north arrived in Braavos. Unique goods from Braavos headed north, especially cold-weather clothing, which the northerners welcomed. Beyond ordinary cargo, the fleet also honored contracts to rescue unlucky captains and crews who ran aground on the Three Sisters Islands. The ability to salvage and return people from those rocks, often without direct reward, unexpectedly spread the reputation of Victa and of Arthur among captains. The reputation was a mix of praise and suspicion. Aware of maritime risks, Victa had left his eldest son, Vicui, behind in Braavos with Arthur. Vicui now handled much of the armory and shipyard dealings. A steady supply of high-quality northern lumber gave Arthur a large share of raw materials for Braavos' armories and shipyards, and allowed him to purchase ships at preferential prices. Counting ships from White Harbor and the Three Sisters, the fleet numbered 15 ocean-going vessels, 4 large three-masted sailing ships, 5 medium purple-sailed ships, and 6 flat-bottomed two-masted rowing ships. White Harbor supplied 2 large three-masted sailing ships and 4 of the flat-bottomed rowing ships. The 3 lords of the Three Sisters provided 2 large three-masters and 2 flat-bottomed rowers. The 5 medium purple-sailed ships were owned by Victa and Arthur. Arthur still didn't fully remember why he had written to Wilfilda of House Manderley, but he was surprised and grateful by how much she trusted him. She had immediately provided 6 ocean-going ships. It was a reminder that ships needed far more than a hull. A large three-masted sailing ship required around 180 hands, while a medium flat-bottomed, two-masted rowing ship took 40 to 50 crew. Arthur reevaluated Wilfilda's influence in House Manderley and occasionally sent her novelty handicrafts from Bravos. The blacksmith shop was managed mainly by the Summer Islander Carl By. Including Carl, the Snow and Peach smithy now had 3 smiths capable of forging the Black Mamba sword. In addition, there were 8 journeyman smiths and 13 apprentices. The front yard of Arthur's mansion could no longer accommodate the Snow and Peach workshop, even with staggered shifts. At Carl's suggestion, Arthur rented a storefront and several adjoining houses in a quieter area of Bravos near the mainland to expand the forge. The original smithy became a teaching and special forging space reserved for Arthur and those who could make the Black Mamba sword. The expanded workshop produced the 3 grades of Bravos rapiers, snow swords, Tau swords, and the Black Mamba swords. Shiny, light chainmail had become popular among Bravos duelists and flashy assassins. Standardized iron nails, tools, and fishing gear sold well among craftsmen and fishermen. Arthur had attempted to craft a few sets of the previously unlocked equipment card, Vine Armor, but each attempt failed in the final step of attribute binding. The sets were scrapped. Arthur let Carl, who knew the process best, lead the research, but with palm trees scarce in Bravos and felling forbidden, the raw materials were hard to come by, and progress remained slow. The insurance business was entrusted to Zahn Bonell. A former captain with solid management sense and a pragmatic streak, Zahn had long hoped for a settling in Bravos. Arthur had actively written to Count Godric to recruit him. Zahn's instincts were correct. After returning to Bravos, he mixed with the insurance merchant Sable Caffey and learned the trade. Zahn proved adept at gathering and processing intelligence. He not only dealt with Bravos insurers and the Three Sisters lords, but also built multiple reliable channels across the narrow sea. With Arthur's financial backing, he cultivated informants in both Bravos and White Harbor and established a preliminary intelligence network to collect market rumors, commodity prices, and other information. The frequent fleet runs made transmissions smoother. Thanks to the precise salvage and safe return one-stop service offered from the Three Sisters these past 6 months, competing insurers in Bravos had either sharply raised their prices or stopped issuing contracts altogether. "Report as usual. Tell me what's on your mind now," Arthur said, seated at the head of the hall table with a single glass of peach wine at his side. Around him stood and sat his lieutenants. To most of them, Arthur seemed tall and strong, with neatly combed gray-brown short hair, a thin stubble on his fair chin, and deep, keen violet eyes. Though he had not yet reached adulthood and his face still held a touch of youth, nobody in the hall thought to be disrespectful. According to Captain Victa's reports, cargo throughput between the North and Bravos is approaching saturation and the profit per voyage is falling, said Account Book Pete, who stood to Arthur's left and took notes as he spoke. "Indeed, my records show diminishing returns on each trip," Pete added. "We can reduce the number of ships. White Harbor's vessels account for half our fleet," Zahn Bonell said, leaning back and rubbing the armrest with his long, webbed hand. "I don't see why the fat merman of Manderley should share the pie without contributing." Vikui, Victa's eldest son, who sat furthest from Zahn, snapped back. "They give us tariff reductions and free warehouses. They bear shipping risks just like we do. They deserve their reward." Carl By, dark-skinned and pragmatic, offered, "Perhaps we open new routes." Summer Islanders were naturally inclined toward trade and exploration. Zahn grinned. "Then let the fat fish men sail new courses. May the Wave Lady and the Lord of the Sky bless their ships to never sink." Arthur stroked his stubble with the back of his hand, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. "Anything else? Our cooperation with the one-eyed fat man may already be noticed by the other insurers," Zahn said, a trace of worry in his eyes as he sipped his wine. "There are whispers they're uniting and may take action. We need to be cautious." "Others are not fools," Arthur said evenly. "After 5 or 6 captains have sunk and returned safely in the past 6 months, exposure was only a matter of time. This is much later than I expected, not earlier." "You expected this?" Zahn relaxed a little at Arthur's calm. "Then what do you want us to do?" Arthur let the question hang for a moment, letting his gaze sweep across Carl, Vikui, and the silent figure of Dwarf Weiss standing like a shadow behind him. Vikui suddenly bowed. "Forgive my abruptness, my lord. I have a private matter to report." "All right. Tell me after this meeting," Arthur said, taking a sip of peach wine and clapping once. "No need for so many formalities." Carl shrugged and reported, "Construction of the new smithy is steady. Nothing to worry about, thanks to Pete running about." Pete, though not formally in charge of operations, served as administrator and saved Arthur a great deal of trouble. Finally, Dwarf Weiss stammered slightly as he spoke. "I have followed your orders and recruited swordsmen loyal to you. After my selection, I've recruited 5 Black Mamba swordsmen and 15 Tau swordsmen." Chapter 38. He can replace it. When everyone had finished reporting and turned to him, Arthur asked, account book Pete at his side, "Pete, how long have I been in Bravos?" 7 months, adult, Pete replied without hesitation. 7 months, huh? Arthur sighed, a look of wonder on his face. Gods be good. Who would have thought we'd come this far in 7 months? "It's all thanks to your leadership, adult," Zahn said earnestly. "If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even be in Bravos. I might have spent my whole life back on Sweet Sister Island." "I didn't do it alone," Arthur shook his head. "Zahn, you were a captain yourself. You know a ship doesn't sail on a captain alone. Sailors, oarsmen, a first mate, even the cook, the doctor, and the fighters, all of them matter." "Adult, Zahn started to protest, but Arthur waved him to silence. If a captain starts sending the crew away over food shortages, the ship's finished sooner or later. He looked at the summer islander, Carl Bai, with approval. Bai was right. We need to open new routes. Vikui, tell your father to assign 2 large ships from the 3 Sisters and one of the purple-sailed fleet and to send someone he trusts to open those routes, Arthur ordered. Yes, which cities? Vikui asked. The city-states in the Stepstones practice slavery and are riddled with pirates and storms. Too many unknowns. Gulltown, Pentos, King's Landing, Arthur decided after a moment. Start with Gulltown, near to far, one at a time. Don't rush. First get familiar with the currents, the climate, the monsoons. Record everything into proper sea charts and logbooks. Yes. Adult, why not ask Manderley to send ships as well? Zahn frowned. Even one ship would help. This is compensation, Arthur replied. Compensation? The 3 Sisters sit between White Harbor and Bravos. Count Godric's salvaging wrecks affects not only the unfortunate captains, but White Harbor itself. Arthur glanced at Zahn in his black silks, looking every bit like a Bravosi lord. If we hadn't tied House Manderley's interests to White Harbor from the start, let them taste the profit, you might be standing at the wall now, dressed in black. Zahn drew in his neck and fell silent. Speaking of salvaging, Arthur continued, what do you all think of the insurance merchant Sable Caffey? My father says Sable Caffey is a greedy fat man who values gold above everything, Vikui said first. He knows his trade, Zahn answered. I've learned a lot of intelligence work from him around Bravos. Account book, Pete was succinct. He's our partner. He provides intelligence. He is a partner. Arthur's smile was small and sharp. A temporary partner. Temporary? Zahn looked confused. How does he see us? Temporary partners. Arthur answered as if to himself. We began because of profit, and it will likely end because of profit. You should be prepared. The situation could get very ugly. When that one-eyed fat man controls the whole insurance market for shipping between Bravos and White Harbor. Pete's eyes shone as he finished Arthur's thought. He won't need us anymore. He could no longer provide us with valuable intelligence. Then what do we do? Zahn's face went pale, sweat beading at his temples. He finally grasped the danger. Should I write to my uncle and ask him to scale back the salvaging? It's not about more or less salvaging, Arthur said to calm him. My point is that the salvaging partnership will end one day. We need to plan for that end. And if other insurance merchants learn we've been working with Sable Caffey to repatriate wrecked captains and crews, the one who should be most nervous is Sable Caffey. The 3 Sisters are far across the narrow sea. Luring ships to run aground to salvage them is immoral. It's a gray business, Zahn said, clutching at the argument. Besides, my uncle repatriated everyone respectfully. We didn't mistreat them. That shouldn't earn us much hatred. Only the other insurance merchants. Vikui sided with Arthur. If other insurance merchants unite, they won't back off easily. They'll likely move against Sable Caffey. If they succeed, we lose Sable's intelligence. If they fail, Sable consolidates control and parts ways with us, Pete observed, putting down his quill. Either way, the salvaging side tied to insurance brings risk and little return. The Bravosi disgust at salvaging showed on Vikui's face. We should cut that part off and focus on shipping operations and the smithy. No, Zahn snapped. We came here because of the insurance business. How can we just... What we're doing in the Three Sisters isn't sustainable anyway, Vikui pressed. Now's the time to stop. Arthur raised a hand to halt their argument. All right, you two, go out first, he turned to Zahn. Stay. Then to Vikui. Wait for me in the side hall. Once the others had left, Arthur stood and refilled Zahn's cup with peach wine. Do you remember the first time we toured Bravos, he asked. I won't forget, Zahn said, his eyes flickering. His voice tightened. You were the one who taught me what the insurance trade was and how to do it. That early cooperation with the insurance merchants gave Arthur his foothold in Bravos. The repatriation of salvage captains brought him a measure of fame and the chance to recruit skilled crews, sailors, and captains to expand the fleet. By profit alone, his costs and risks had far outweighed the gains, but he had done it to keep his promise to Count Godric. Arthur's voice dropped to a near whisper. You always said salvaging wrecks is immoral. Now we need to look forward. But adult, what else can the Three Sisters do besides smuggling and salvaging? Zahn asked bitterly. Fishing and crabbing, are those the future for the islanders? We can collect customs, Arthur said, patting Zahn's shoulder. Have you ever thought about replacing Sable Caffey for the future of the Three Sisters? Zahn looked up, startled, confusion giving way to curiosity. You mean, replace him? Replace the one-eyed fat man. We'll take over the shipping insurance trade from White Harbor to Bravos. It's another way to collect customs. But we don't have intelligence networks, Zahn protested. Insurance is an industry, Arthur said. The other insurance merchants have information networks. Do you want to work with them? Zahn asked. No. Arthur's smile grew colder. I want to work with Sable Caffey to crush them, to drive them all out. He tilted his head back and drained his cup of peach wine. Dealing with one merchant is easier than dealing with a whole cartel. If we pull it off, every ship sailing from Bravos to White Harbor will effectively pay us a customs duty. Zahn drained his own cup, his face grave like never before. By the Lady of the Waves and the Lord of the Sky, I swear I will follow you in all things from now on. The side hall was dimmer than the main room, the lamps throwing only a weak glow. Arthur came in and found Vikui already there, along with a woman he didn't recognize. Who is she? Arthur asked. Is this the private matter you mentioned? You've met her before, Vikui said quickly, standing. Her name is Finny. Her husband was a Bravosi captain who knew my father. He was one of the captains we sent back to Bravos after his ship ran aground near the Three Sisters. With our help, they got compensation from the insurance merchants, and the family came to thank us. Arthur studied Finny. She looked exhausted, her hair dry and dull, her cheeks hollowed, the whites of her eyes clouded with red veins. She was a woman drowned in grief, he thought. Madam, you don't look well. He sat. Is there something you need of me? Her voice came out hoarse and broken. She trembled so much that Arthur could barely make out her words. Vikui poured her a glass of sweet wine, and the color returned to her face long enough for her to speak. They killed my husband, she said. The men who came back said they locked him in a raven cage and let him die of thirst. The ravens pecked at him until only white bones were left. Why? Arthur asked, frowning. They said it was the Lord of Pebble Isle. He and his men plunder passing ships like pirates. Finny's voice was raw with anger and sorrow. They let go the captains who had insurance contracts. Pebble Isle sat in the bight between the Three Sisters Peninsula and the Fingers, a place ships must pass traveling between White Harbor and the Vale or Bravos. Arthur felt the map turn in his head. Is there anything I can do to help? He asked. I want the head of the Lord of Pebble Isle. I want justice. Finny's eyes flashed with a fierce, grief-made light. I've gone to Sea King officials, to judges, even to priests of the Faceless Men. They all refused me. The Sea King said sea trade is risky, misfortune happens. The judge said there's no proof, and his judgment can't reach the other side of the narrow sea. The faceless men priest said all men must die. Arthur listened, then shook his head. Why did you go to them first? Why didn't you come to me? My people once saved your husband and helped him get compensation. She faltered, and then, in a sudden movement, it dropped to her knees and gripped his hand. Sir, please, my husband died so cruelly. Arthur watched her for a long moment, unmoved by the theatrics. What good is a head? He asked at last. It won't bring him back. He offered another kind of help. I can take your son as an apprentice in my smithy, or I can give you enough coin to start over somewhere else. Finny kept shaking her head. No, I only want justice, only his head. Her obsession and hatred were plain as flame. Arthur was silent for a while, then finally said, All right, I will see that you get justice, but not now. Relief washed over Finny's face. Arthur arranged for someone to accompany her to claim a piece of Valyrian steel she had been told was available. Vikui resumed his report. Besides Pebble Isle, he said, Twins Isle shows the same pattern. Only the 3 captains who bought Caffey's insurance were returned. The others were not. Arthur tapped a finger against his cup. It looks like whoever's behind this is targeting Caffey's policies. I thought the insurance men would fight fire with fire, but this is worse. They aren't even hiding it. They've hired pirates, and I don't know what else they did to make the lords of Pebble and Twins go mad. Sir, what should we do? Vikui asked. We're not the aggrieved parties here. This depends on what Caffey wants to do, Arthur said. If Finny could find her way to him, he knew Caffey would come once a plan was decided. Caffey arrived the next day at noon, earlier than Arthur expected. He was rounder than Arthur remembered, his one blind eye replaced with a blue sapphire that made his face seem less hard. His bully dog, Claus, squatted under his chair and barked without stopping. Caffey, fingers heavy with jeweled rings, made a show of counting on them as he spoke. In the last few days, 7 captains have come to claim insurance, he said. You people from the Sunset Kingdom always like to move in 7s with your cargoes. Arthur shrugged. He was more distracted by the dog, which had apparently used his mere carpet for waste. He kept his face polite and focused on Caffey. We didn't do this. You are responsible. The one-eyed man's voice hardened. If I hadn't worked with you, I wouldn't have been targeted. We honored the contract, but this isn't in the agreement. Arthur shook his head. If you want, we can terminate our contract and end our partnership now. He spread his hands. You know I act mainly as an intermediary. I make almost no profit. No profit? Caffey sniffed. Then I'll take back the mansion, and you'll have to go. Your Snow and Peach smithy won't be able to run. Do as you please, Arthur said casually. The heart of a smithy is reputation and the smith's skill. I could reopen anywhere in Braavos. Caffey's tone softened at that. Can you force those 2 island lords to fall in line? You know Zahn, Arthur said. If I wanted to, you'd have heard about my work on the 3 sisters. But why should I? We're separated by the narrow sea and by stone castles. Gold dulls their ears. We are friends, aren't we? Caffey said. Arthur pinched his thumb and forefinger together. Friends don't make unreasonable demands. Then name your price, Caffey said, suddenly serious. If it's too high, I'll just stop selling insurance for the Braavos White Harbor route. Arthur did not answer at once. In Westeros, lords hold tournaments. Knights come from all over for the joust. Honor and prizes are the reward. That horse and lance nonsense? Caffey sneered with his one eye. The Sunset Kingdom's entertainments are odd. Our Braavos water dance is finer and deadlier. In the slave cities to the east, Meereen's arenas are more thrilling. Gladiators fight to the death. Arthur ignored the sneer. I'm not a knight. I may never win such honors, but I want the victor's prize. I've heard the jousting champion can receive 40,000 gold dragons. Caffey sat up, fat body alert, claws barking even louder at the change. 40,000? He said, greed in his voice. The money I paid those 7 captains isn't even 40,000. Arthur was irritated by the dog's noise, but pressed on. You think a letter can make those lords obedient? No, it will take force. You should know hiring a mercenary company will cost far more than 40,000, and you still have no guarantee the captain will do the job, Caffey said, his confidence wavering. It's true the cost will be high, Arthur said. But imagine once this is done, there will be no other islands interfering along the Bight or the Fingers. You can set the insurance price as you please. Caffey stared into his glass, thinking, I don't have that much coin in Westerosi gold. I can offer goods of equivalent value, split into 2 shipments, 20,000 each. Once the goods are inspected and the contract is signed, you'll get the information you want, Arthur said, patting the fat man on the shoulder. Caffey nodded. I hope so. As they walked him to the door, claws still growling and baring its teeth at Arthur, Arthur could not help but ask with something like curiosity, Caffey, your dog never liked me. Can I pet its head? You'd better not, unless you want to be bitten. Caffey scooped the dog into his arms and stroked it. Claws whined contentedly there, suddenly adorable and simple-minded. Claws hate strange smells. If you were Bravosi, it might be different. Arthur feigned disappointment. A shame. He watched Caffey board a pleasure boat with his dog, and then turned to prepare. He would mobilize men, but there were other preparations, most importantly securing the claim rights to the 2 islands. That was the key. Normally it would be impossible, but these 2 lords had been pushed into openly condoning or committing acts of piracy. That changed everything. Chapter 40. As High as Honor. In the 7 kingdoms, there was a saying about king and hand. The king dreams, the hand fashions the dream. Among common folk, it was less flattering. The king feasts, the hand deals with the shit. King Robert Baratheon ate and drank with a vigor that matched his appetite for war. In peace, his energy had nowhere noble to go. He spent his days hunting, carousing, visiting brothels, and holding tournaments. Those pleasures sated his appetites and used up whatever drive he might otherwise have given to rule. Matters like legal arbitration, treasury audits, and petitions from small folk, matters that were properly the king's concern, left him bored and irritable. He called them nothing more than counting copper coins. As Hand of the King, Jon Arryn had carried the burden of rule since Robert's rebellion 10 years before. Nearing 70, broad-shouldered and missing half his teeth, he had governed for his ward, the king, and for a decade he had done it with the stubborn decency his house demanded. As high as honor, House Arryn's words, had guided him. He had put the realm first, often at the expense of his own lands and the continuation of his line. The king's chair in the council chamber was empty as usual. Maester Pylos cleared his throat and drew a stack of letters from his sleeve, reading aloud the reports the ravens had brought. A letter from House Manderley at White Harbor, he said, fumbling a page with his dry hand. They accused the lords of Pebble Isle and Twins Isle in the bite of tolerating pirates who prey on passing merchantmen. Pylos's maester's chain clinked against his chest as he spoke. They report the pirates lock captured crews in crow cages and use cruel methods. If left unchecked, fewer ships will trade with White Harbor and the customs revenue will drop. Stannis Baratheon, master of ships, clenched his jaw. He was a man who kept his temper like a blade. If this is true, he said, hard as steel, by the law of the realm those 2 lords should hang. I will take the royal fleet and deal with them. Renly, newly master of laws and dressed to please, laughed easily. He still had the soft, bright face Robert had worn in youth. If I recall, Pebble Isle and Twins Isle are vassals of the Vale. Our Hand, the Warden of the East, Lord Arryn, should have a say first. Lord Arryn signaled for patience and looked to the Master of Whisperers. Varys, have you heard anything of this? Varys smiled his slow, oily smile. My little birds tell me there are pirate flotillas working the bite and the fingers. They take prize crews and keep them in crow cages on Pebble Isle and Twins Isle. Some of the captains are sent to Bravos. The sailors and common hands are sold to Myr. By the 7, Arryn snapped, rare heat flashing in his clouded eyes. Myr is a place of slave traders. Selling people like that, colluding with pirates, is a capital offense. It brings shame upon the Vale. To the royal fleet, Stannis said. I order you, Lord Arryn, let me lead the fleet to Pebble Isle and Twins Isle, root out the pirates, and examine whether those lords are guilty. Very well, Stannis nodded. Jon Arryn turned then to the Master of Coin. Gerald Grafton, marshal the funds for the campaign. Gerald Grafton, Lord of Gulltown and Master of Coin, frowned. Your Grace, you know the treasury has been strained of late. We borrowed heavily from the Iron Bank 2 years ago to quell the Ironmen. The fleet's current budget is stretched to keep the ships ready as it is. To send them on long cruises and sustain a campaign will need more gold than we have. Stannis's face did not soften. If the law is not enforced, others will follow. The realm will decay. If you cannot find the coin, Stannis added, cold, then perhaps we must find someone who can. Grafton bristled. Gold dragons do not fall from the sky because you name another master of coin. They are earned, coin by coin. While the two men bristled, Maester Pylos cleared his throat again and offered counsel. He unfolded another letter. There is a raven from the Three Sisters. Count Godric of Sweet Sister Island says he will confront the pirates in the Bight. He offers, as tribute, the equivalent of 3 shiploads of trade goods to the Iron Throne, regularly. Three Sisters are a haven for smugglers, Stannis said through clenched teeth. Godric lights fires to lure ships onto the reefs. I warned him I would hang him if he did it again. I do not trust him. Renly chuckled. If the terms suit, let smugglers and pirates fight among themselves. We gain either way. Varys spoke for the first time since, his voice soft and flat. My networks report that Count Godric has been trading legitimately this year. He has been working with a group of Bravosi captains, moving goods between White Harbor and Bravos. Grafton's eyes brightened. If he pays and does the work, we need not spend the royal gold. 3 shiploads in trade and no fleet to maintain. It's profitable. Stannis slammed his palm on the table. Salvaging wrecks and smuggling are crimes. We should destroy them, not endorse them. Jon Arryn watched the men argue and felt the weight of years press down on him. If he were younger, he would have raised levies and marched into the Bight himself, hurled the guilty from their keeps, impaled pirate heads along the shore to warn would-be thieves. But he was old. His wife had just borne a sickly heir who needed his care, and there were too many matters of state. He had learned to compromise. At last, under Stannis' unblinking stare, Arryn sighed and spoke quietly. Write to Count Godric. Give him authority to deal with Pebble Isle and Twine's Isle. If he can rid the Bight of pirates and send us 3 shiploads of goods on a regular basis, I will name him Warden of the Bight. Next. Maester Pylos leafed through more letters. Varys' little birds kept whispering. The raid in the Fingers was only one of the matters the council would consider that day.